What if Issei got married with Venelana and Rias and had kids? The autumn moon hung heavy over Ko Academy, casting silver shadows across the old school building where the Occult Research Club made its headquarters. Issei Hayato stood before an intricate magic circle, its crimson light pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat, completely unaware that his life was about to transform in ways that would make all his previous adventures seem mundane by comparison. Are you certain about this, Rias? Akino Himejima asked, her usual playful tone replaced with something more serious. The black-haired queen stood at the edge of the circle, her violet eyes reflecting the magical light with an intensity that suggested she understood far more about what was happening than Issei did. Rias Gremory, his beloved king and master, stood on the opposite side of the circle. Her crimson hair seemed to glow with an inner fire, and her blue-green eyes held a mixture of determination and something else. Was that nervousness? Issei had seen Rias face down gods and monsters without flinching, so what could possibly make her anxious now? The contract must be fulfilled, Rias said, her voice steady despite the tension in her shoulders. The terms were set centuries ago, and the conditions have been met. We cannot ignore the old laws, not even for this. Would someone please explain what's going on? Issei asked, his voice cracking slightly. The crimson gauntlet on his left arm pulsed with warmth, and he could feel Drake's consciousness stirring within the boosted gear. Partner, I suggest you brace yourself, the dragon's voice rumbled in his mind. I have witnessed many strange things in my millennia of existence, but this is unprecedented even by devil standards. Before Issei could respond, the magic circle blazed with renewed intensity, and reality itself seemed to ripple. The temperature in the room dropped, then surged with heat, as space began to tear open above the center of the formation. Through the shimmering portal stepped two figures that made Issei's breath catch in his throat. The first was expected, Lord Xiaticus Gremory, Rias's father, his distinguished features set in an expression of resignation mixed with something that might have been sympathy. He wore the formal robes of a devil nobleman, and his presence filled the room with the weight of centuries of power and authority. The second figure made Issei's heart skip several beats. Lady Venelana Gremory emerged from the portal like a goddess descending from a higher plane. She was breathtaking in a way that transcended simple physical beauty. Her silver hair cascaded down her back like a waterfall of moonlight. Her violet eyes held the depth of ancient wisdom, and her figure, even clothed in an elegant gown that somehow managed to be both modest and incredibly alluring, would have made any mortal man forget how to breathe. Issei had met Rias's mother before, of course, but he'd never seen her like this. There was a formality to her bearing now, a ritual significance to her presence that made his instincts scream that something monumental was about to occur. Lord and Lady Gremory, Rias said, bowing deeply. Thank you for coming. As if we had a choice, Xiaticus muttered, though his tone held no real anger. When the contract of crimson binding activates, even a head of house must answer. Contract of what? Issei asked, looking between Rias and her parents. Rias, what's happening? Why do I feel like I'm about to be hit by another truck? Despite the tension, several people in the room chuckled at his reference to his own death and reincarnation. Rias's expression softened as she looked at him. Issei, do you remember the raiding game against Serog Bale? Of course, Issei said. How could I forget? That was one of the toughest fights of my life. Why? He stopped as understanding began to dawn. Oh no, please tell me this isn't about that weird sensation I felt when I defeated him. I'm afraid it is, Venelana said, and the sound of her voice sent an involuntary shiver down Issei's spine. It was rich and melodious, carrying centuries of authority yet somehow achingly gentle. Though the situation is far more complex than you realize, young Sekiryutai. Akino moved to stand beside Issei, clearly ready to offer support, while Kaneko appeared from the shadows, her usual emotionless expression betraying the slightest hint of concern. Kiba stood by the door, his hand resting unconsciously on his sword hilt. Perhaps I should explain, Xiaticus said, stepping forward. Though I warn you, Hayato-kun, that you may wish you were facing another raiding game when I'm finished. Xiaticus gestured, and the magic circle beneath them shifted, its patterns rearranging into something that looked far older than the modern devil magic Issei had grown accustomed to. Symbols that hurt to look at directly emerged from the depths of the formation, and Issei could feel them resonating with something deep in his chest. 400 years ago, Xiaticus began, his voice taking on the quality of a history lesson. The Gremry and Bale clans were on the verge of war. A dispute over territory and resources had escalated to the point where all-out conflict seemed inevitable. Both families would have suffered catastrophic losses. My grandmother, Lady Kaisis Gremry, proposed a solution, Venelana continued, taking up the narrative. A contract that would bind the two families together through marriage, ensuring that any conflict between them would harm both equally. It was called the Contract of Crimson Binding. The terms were specific, Xiaticus said. If ever a Gremry heir and a Bale heir were to engage in formal combat, a raiding game, a duel, any sanctioned battle, and if the Gremry were to emerge victorious by defeating the Bale heir directly in single combat, then the Gremry who achieved this feat would be bound by the contract. Issei felt his stomach sinking. Bound how? Rias stepped forward, her expression a mixture of determination and apology. The victor would be required to marry into both families, to take a spouse from both the Gremry and Bale bloodlines, creating a union that would permanently merge the political interests of both clans. But I'm not a Gremry, Issei protested. I'm your servant, yes, but I'm not actually. You became a Gremry the moment Rias reincarnated you, Venelana interrupted gently. As her pawn, you carry the Gremry name and bloodline. For the purposes of devil law, you are as much a member of our house as any naturally born child. I tried to warn you, partner, Dre grumbled. Devil contracts are not to be taken lightly. They bind at levels that transcend normal understanding of obligation. Okay, Issei said slowly, trying to process this information. So I need to marry someone from the Bale clan? I mean, that's complicated, but there's more, Rias said, and the tone in her voice made Issei's blood run cold. The contract was designed to create the strongest possible bond between the families. It requires that the victor marry not just into the opposing family, but also into their own. I don't understand, Issei said, though a terrible suspicion was beginning to form. The contract requires you to marry both a Gremry and a Bale, Xiaticus explained. Specifically, it requires you to marry the heir of the Gremry line and a direct blood relation to the head of the Bale house. The marriage must occur within 3 lunar cycles of the triggering combat, and all parties must enter into it willingly, or the consequences are severe. Severe how? Kaneko asked quietly from behind Issei. The death of everyone involved in the trigger event, Venelana said flatly. The contract was designed to be unbreakable. Refusal means execution by magical backlash. The room fell silent. Issei could hear his own heartbeat thundering in his ears. He looked at Rias, seeing the conflict in her eyes, the way her hands trembled slightly despite her composed exterior. So I need to marry Rias, he said slowly. Which I'm actually okay with, that's been the plan for a while now. But who from the Bale? He stopped. His eyes widened. No. No, you can't be serious. I'm afraid we are, Xiaticus said heavily. There are very few direct blood relations to the Bale head who could fulfill the contract's requirements. Serorg's mother is in her eternal sleep. His younger siblings are far too young. That leaves only one option. Mother, Rias said quietly. Venelana Gremry, née Bale, the younger sister of the head of the Bale clan. The only person who meets all the contract's requirements. Issei felt like the floor had disappeared beneath him. He stared at Venelana, this impossibly beautiful, dignified woman who was old enough to be his great-great-great-grandmother several times over, who was the mother of the woman he loved, who was married to the man standing right there looking like he'd rather be anywhere else in the universe. This is insane, Issei breathed. This can't be real. Someone tell me this is some kind of elaborate prank. I wish it were, Venelana said, and for the first time, Issei saw genuine emotion crack through her composed exterior. Believe me, Issei-kun, none of us desired this outcome. But the contract is absolute. I have spent the last 3 weeks consulting with every legal expert in the underworld, every scholar of ancient magic, every devil who might know of a loophole. There is none. But you're married, Issei said, gesturing at Xiaticus. You can't just. Actually, she can, Xiaticus interrupted, his voice heavy. Devil marriage contracts include provisions for exactly these sorts of situations. Political marriages, ritual obligations, contracts like this one. Venelana would not be dissolving our marriage, but rather, expanding her marital bonds. This is the underworld, Rias said softly. Polygamy has always been acceptable among devil nobility, especially when political necessity demands it. Having multiple spouses is not uncommon, particularly for powerful devils. What's unusual is the specific configuration this contract requires. Issei's mind was reeling. He tried to imagine it, being married to both Rias and her mother simultaneously. Living together. Sharing everything. The implications were staggering. What about you? Issei asked, turning to Xiaticus. How can you be okay with this? The older devil's expression was complicated. I am not okay with it, Haida-kun. But I am pragmatic. I have been married to Venelana for nearly 400 years. I know her heart, her honor, her commitment to family and duty. I also know that if we do not fulfill this contract, we all die, including our daughter, whom we both love more than our own lives. He paused, seeming to struggle with his next words. More than that, I have watched you, Issei Haida. I have seen how you protect my daughter, how you have grown from a foolish boy into a man worthy of respect. You have proven yourself in battle, in character, and in devotion. If anyone were to be bound to my family in this way, I suppose I can think of far worse options. That's not exactly a ringing endorsement, Issei muttered. It's the best you'll get from a devil being forced to share his wife, Xiaticus shot back, though there was a glimmer of dark humor in his eyes. Trust me, the fact that I'm not trying to incinerate you speaks volumes about my self-control. Venelana moved closer to Issei, her movements graceful and deliberate. She stopped just before him, close enough that he could smell the subtle perfume she wore, something floral and expensive that made his head spin. Issei-kun, she said softly, her violet eyes meeting his brown ones. I want you to understand something. This contract binds us all, but it does not dictate emotions. You are not required to love me. You are not required to feel anything beyond what the ritual obligations demand. I have lived long enough to understand the difference between duty and desire. But Rias interjected, moving to stand on Issei's other side, we cannot simply go through the motions. The contract requires genuine willingness from all parties. We must enter this marriage with open hearts, accepting each other fully. Anything less, and the magic will sense the deception. Issei looked between them, the young woman he'd loved for years, and the mature beauty who had always been kind to him, but whom he'd never imagined in any context beyond Rias's terrifying but nice mother. The situation was so far beyond his comprehension that he almost wanted to laugh. I need to think, he said. This is too much. You're asking me to marry both of you, to somehow build a life where I'm married to a mother and daughter simultaneously, where I'm supposed to. He couldn't even finish the thought. You have 1 week, Xiaticus said. The contract gives us some time to prepare, but we must begin the formal proceedings within 7 days, or the backlash will start. It will be slow at first, illness, bad luck, minor catastrophes. But it will escalate quickly, and if I agree? Issei asked. What happens then? Then we plan a wedding, Venelana said with a small, slightly sad smile. Probably the most controversial wedding in devil history. We will face opposition, scandal, and judgment from nearly every corner of our society. The Maos will have to be involved. Every noble house will have an opinion. It will not be easy, but we'll be alive, Rias added. All of us. And, Issei, I know this isn't what you envisioned when you thought about us being together, but I also know that you have a heart large enough to embrace complicated situations. You've proven that time and again. Issei wanted to argue, to protest, to find some way out of this impossible situation. But as he looked at Rias's face, he saw not just the devil princess he'd fallen in love with, but the scared young woman who was facing a death sentence unless he agreed to something that seemed to violate every social norm he'd grown up with. And when he looked at Venelana, he saw something that surprised him. She was scared too. For all her composure, all her centuries of experience, she was facing an equally impossible situation. She would have to accept a marriage to a teenage boy young enough to be her great-grandson dozens of times over, would have to somehow make this work while knowing her husband of 4 centuries watched, would have to share her daughter's marriage bed. The weight of responsibility settled over Issei like a familiar cloak. Hadn't he always been the one to shoulder impossible burdens? Hadn't he always chosen to protect those he cared about, no matter the cost to himself? I need to talk to them, Issei said suddenly. Alone. Rias, Venelana, is there somewhere we can speak privately? Ziaticus nodded. Use my office. It's warded against all forms of surveillance, even from other mouths. He waved his hand, and a portal opened in the air. Take your time. Well, not too much time. But enough. The office of Lord Ziaticus Gremry was exactly what Issei would have expected. Luxurious without being gaudy, filled with books and magical artifacts, and possessing a view of the underworld that took his breath away. The city of Lilith sprawled beneath them, its lights twinkling like earthbound stars, but Issei barely noticed any of it. He stood in the center of the room, with Rias on one side and Venelana on the other, and tried to find words for feelings he didn't fully understand. I love you, Rias, he said finally. I think I've loved you since the moment you saved me, maybe even before that. Every day since then, I've been trying to become someone worthy of standing beside you, someone you could be proud to marry. You already are, Rias said softly, tears glistening in her eyes. Issei, you've always been worthy. You just couldn't see it. But this, Issei continued, this changes everything. This isn't just us anymore. This is... I don't even know what this is. He turned to Venelana. Lady Venelana, I respect you enormously. You've always been kind to me, always treated me with more dignity than I probably deserved. But I've never thought of you as anything other than my future mother-in-law. How am I supposed to suddenly shift to seeing you as a wife? Venelana was quiet for a moment, her expression thoughtful. Then she moved to the window, gazing out at the city below. When I married Ziaticus, she said slowly, I was in a very similar position to where you are now. It was a political marriage, arranged by our families to strengthen ties between the Bale and Gremry clans. I barely knew him. I certainly wasn't in love with him. She turned back to face them, and her eyes held a distant warmth. But over time, through shared experiences and genuine effort to understand each other, love grew. It wasn't the passionate, burning love of romantic stories. It was something steadier, deeper. A love built on respect, companionship, and mutual commitment to something larger than ourselves. Are you saying that's what you expect here? Issei asked. I'm saying that love takes many forms, Venelana replied. And that perhaps we're all thinking about this wrong. Yes, the contract requires marriage. Yes, it requires genuine acceptance. But it doesn't require us to have everything figured out on day one. We can grow into this, just as Ziaticus and I grew into our marriage. Rias moved closer to her mother, an unusual vulnerability in her expression. Mother, can I ask you something honestly? Always, dear. Are you angry with me? For defeating Serorg? For triggering the contract? Venelana's expression softened immediately, and she reached out to cup Rias's cheek. Oh, my darling girl. No. Never. You did exactly what you should have done. You fought with everything you had, and you won. I'm proud of you. This situation is not your fault any more than it's anyone's fault. It's simply an ancient obligation coming due. She glanced at Issei, and something flickered in her eyes. Amusement? Acceptance? Besides, if I must enter into this arrangement, I can think of worse partners than the legendary Securudii who has proven himself capable of defying gods. Despite everything, Issei felt his cheeks heating up. Even in this impossible situation, being praised by someone as impressive as Venelana Gremry made his heart race. Well, partner, you've certainly gotten yourself into situations before, but this one might take the cake, Drake commented dryly. A mother and daughter. The devil nobility will talk about this for centuries. Not helping, Drake. I'm not trying to help. I'm just observing. Though I will say this, both women are remarkable in their own ways. If you must be bound by an ancient contract, you could do far worse. Issei took a deep breath, organizing his thoughts. Okay. Let me see if I understand this correctly. We get married, all three of us somehow. We live together. We're expected to act as actual spouses in every sense. Yes, Rias said quietly. The contract requires a genuine marital bond. That means sharing living space, making decisions together, and... She trailed off, blushing furiously. Physical intimacy, Venelana finished calmly, though Issei noticed a slight pink tinge to her cheeks as well. The contract will monitor the nature of our bonds. If we simply live as roommates, it will sense the deception and the backlash will begin. We must truly be married in every sense. The implications of that hit Issei like a truck, again. He tried not to think about what that meant, about sharing a bed with both Rias and her mother, about the reality of what their marriage would entail in the most intimate moments. His face burned red, and he could see both women were equally flustered by the acknowledgement. One step at a time, Rias said, seeing his expression. We don't have to figure out every detail right now. We just need to decide if we're willing to try. What about children? Issei asked suddenly, his voice cracking slightly. I mean, if we're really married, eventually that's going to come up, right? Venelana and Rias exchanged glances, and for a moment, Issei saw something pass between them, an understanding born of their shared blood and the impossible situation they now faced together. That's complicated, Venelana said carefully. Devil fertility is different from human fertility. We can control when we conceive through magic. But yes, eventually, if this marriage is to be accepted as legitimate by devil society, children would be expected. Children from both of us, Rias added quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. The contract would likely require heirs from both wives to truly seal the bond between the families. It's part of what makes this arrangement so permanent. Issei's head was spinning. Children. With both of them. The thought was overwhelming in ways he couldn't even begin to process. Siblings and half-siblings who would also be cousins. A family tree so complicated it would require magical diagrams just to explain. His children would call Rias both mother and sister, depending on which child they were talking to. Zioticus would be both grandfather and great-grandfather to the same generation. This is insane, he muttered, running his hand through his hair in frustration. Completely, utterly insane. Yes, Venelana agreed, her voice soft but firm. It is. But it's also our reality, unless we want to die in 3 months. And death, I assure you, is far more permanent than any awkward family dynamics. The blunt statement cut through Issei's spiraling thoughts like a blade. He looked at Rias, really looked at her, and saw the woman who had given him a second chance at life, who had believed in him when no one else did, who had stood by him through every impossible battle and world-threatening crisis. She had saved him from death, trained him, fought beside him, and loved him despite all his flaws and perverted tendencies. Then he looked at Venelana, and for the first time, he tried to see her not as Rias's mother, not as the intimidating matriarch of the Gremery household, but as a person in her own right. A woman who had lived for centuries, who had raised incredible children including Rias and Surzex, who had managed a noble house through political upheaval and countless challenges, who was facing an impossible situation with grace and courage that he could only aspire to match. She was beautiful, yes, devastatingly so. But more than that, she was strong in ways that had nothing to do with physical power. She was willing to sacrifice her comfortable life, her established marriage, her very dignity, all to protect her daughter and honor an ancient obligation. That took a kind of strength Issei was only beginning to understand. If I agree to this, Issei said slowly, his voice gaining conviction as he spoke, I need some promises from both of you. Name them, Rias said immediately, stepping closer to him. First, we're honest with each other. Always. No matter how uncomfortable or awkward. If this is going to work at all, we need complete honesty. No hiding feelings, no pretending things are fine when they're not, no secrets. Both women nodded solemnly. Second, we figure things out together. I'm not going to pretend I know how to handle any of this. I barely know how to handle a normal relationship, let alone whatever this is going to be. But we make decisions as a team, all three of us. No one gets left out, no one's feelings get dismissed. Agreed, Venelana said, her violet eyes reflecting the city lights behind Issei. This only works if we're all equally invested. Third, and here Issei's voice became intense, the same tone he used when facing down enemies who threatened those he loved, we protect each other. No matter what society says, no matter what kind of scandal or opposition we face, we stand together. If I'm going to be married to both of you, then that means I'll protect both of you with everything I have. But I need to know you'll do the same, for me and for each other. Rias stepped forward and took his hand, her grip firm and warm. Issei, I've always protected you. always stood by you. That will never change, contract or no contract. You're my pawn, my boyfriend, and now you'll be my husband. I would die before I let anyone hurt you. Venelana moved closer as well, placing her hand over both of theirs. The gesture was intimate in a way that sent a shiver down Issei's spine, not uncomfortable, but significant. This was the first time they touched as people about to be bound together for life. And I swear on the Baal name and the Gremry honor that I will stand with both of you, protect both of you, and do everything in my power to make this work, Venelana said, her voice carrying the weight of centuries of kept promises. Not just for survival, but because if we're going to do this, we might as well do it right. Half measures will only make everyone miserable. The three of them stood there, hands joined, and Issei felt something shift in the air around them. It wasn't quite magic, wasn't quite emotion, it was something deeper, a fundamental recognition that their fates were now intertwined in ways that transcended normal understanding. The very fabric of reality seemed to acknowledge their decision, and Issei could feel the contract of crimson binding responding to their acceptance, its ancient magic recognizing willing participants. Well spoken, partner, Drake rumbled approvingly. The Red Dragon Emperor doesn't back down from challenges, no matter how unconventional. Though I must admit, even I never imagined you'd end up in a situation quite like this. You and me both, Drake. You and me both. For what it's worth, you're handling this better than most would. These are both remarkable women. The road ahead will be difficult, but I believe you can make it work. You've faced gods and survived. A complicated marriage should be manageable by comparison. I'm not sure that logic holds up, but I appreciate the vote of confidence. Okay, Issei said finally, his voice surprisingly steady despite the enormity of what he was agreeing to. Okay. Let's do this. Let's get married, all of us, and let's show Devil Society that even the most impossible situations can work if you face them with courage and honesty. Rias threw her arms around Issei, tears streaming down her face. Thank you, she whispered fiercely against his chest. Thank you for being brave enough to try. Thank you for not running away. Thank you for being you. Issei held her tightly, feeling her shake with a mixture of relief and residual fear. He looked over her shoulder at Venelana, who was watching them with an expression of profound relief and something else, gratitude, perhaps, or maybe respect. After a moment, Venelana stepped forward and, hesitantly, joined the embrace. It was awkward at first. Issei had never hugged his future mother-in-law before, and certainly not in this context. But as her arms wrapped around both of them, he felt something unexpected, a sense of rightness, as though the three of them fit together in a way that shouldn't work but somehow did. We'll make this work, Venelana murmured, her voice carrying a determination that Issei had only heard from her when she was discussing the most serious of political matters. Together, we'll navigate whatever comes. And perhaps we might even find happiness in this arrangement. They stood like that for a long moment, three people bound by fate and ancient magic, holding each other in Lord Gremry's office while the underworld sprawled beneath them. Issei knew that when they stepped back through that portal, everything would change. There would be planning and politics, ceremonies and scandals, opposition from conservatives and fascination from progressives. But right now, in this moment, it was just the three of them making a choice to face the impossible together. We should probably go back, Rias said eventually, pulling away and wiping her eyes. Father and the others will be wondering about our decision, and we have a wedding to plan, Venelana added with a small smile that held both amusement and trepidation. The most controversial wedding in Devil history. No pressure. Issei laughed despite himself. When has my life ever been simple? I died, got reborn as a devil, collected a harem that would make my teenage self's head explode, fought little gods, and now I'm marrying a mother and daughter. At this point, I'm just rolling with it. That's the spirit, Venelana said, and there was genuine warmth in her eyes now. Adaptability is an underrated virtue. As they prepared to return through the portal, Issei took one last look at the city of Lilith spread out below. Somewhere down there were people who would celebrate this union, people who would condemn it, people who would be fascinated by it, and people who would try to destroy it. The coming months would test them in ways that raiding games and battles never could. But as Rias took his right hand and Venelana took his left, Issei felt something he hadn't expected to feel. Hope. Not just hope for survival, but hoped that maybe, just maybe, they could build something meaningful from this impossible situation. Ready, partner? Drake asked. As ready as I'll ever be. Let's do this. They stepped through the portal together, hand in hand, returning to face Theodicus and the rest of the Occult Research Club. The moment they emerged, everyone turned to look at them, questions written clearly on every face. We've made our decision, Issei announced, his voice clear and strong. We're going through with it. We're getting married, all three of us. Theodicus's expression was unreadable for a moment, then he nodded slowly. Very well. Then we have much to prepare. The Maos will need to be informed, the ceremony will need to be arranged, and the entire underworld will need to be made ready for what is about to happen. Let them talk, Issei said firmly. Let them gossip and judge and speculate. We'll prove that this can work. We'll show them that love and family can exist even in the most unconventional circumstances. Aquino was smiling widely, though her eyes held a hint of concern. Well, this is certainly going to make things interesting, though I have to admit, I never thought I'd see the day when Issei-kun would be marrying both Bucho and Bucho's mother. None of us did, Rias said, though she was smiling too now, her hands still firmly clasped in Issei's. But here we are. And we're going to make the best of it. Kaneko stepped forward, her small face serious. Senpai, are you sure about this? This is bigger than any battle we've faced. I know, Kaneko, Issei said gently. But when have I ever backed down from protecting the people I care about? This is just a different kind of battle, one fought with trust and commitment instead of fists and power. Kiba nodded approvingly. Well said, Issei. You have our support, of course. All of us. As the Occult Research Club gathered around them, offering congratulations and support, Issei felt the weight of his decision settle fully onto his shoulders. This was real now. This was happening. In a matter of weeks, he would stand before all of Devil Society and marry not one, but two of the most important women in his life. It was terrifying. It was overwhelming. It was completely insane. But as he looked at Rias's determined smile and Venelana's quiet strength, Issei realized something important. He wasn't facing this alone. Whatever came next, they would face it together. And somehow, that made all the difference. The Grand Cathedral of Lilith had stood at the heart of the underworld's capital for over 2,000 years, a monument to devil tradition and power that had witnessed countless ceremonies, coronations, and contracts. Its obsidian spires reached toward the perpetual twilight sky of the underworld, while its interior blazed with magical flames that cast dancing shadows across walls inscribed with the names of every significant devil marriage in recorded history. Tonight those walls would bear witness to something unprecedented. Issei Hayato stood in a private preparation chamber, staring at his reflection in an ornate mirror that showed not just his physical appearance, but also the currents of magical energy flowing through and around him. The formal devil wedding attire felt strange on his body, deep crimson robes edged with gold thread that seemed to shimmer with its own internal light, ceremonial armor pieces that were more decorative than functional, and a cloak that bore both the Gremry crest and, surprisingly, a newly designed emblem that combined elements of the Gremry Baal and Security symbols. You look like you're about to face an execution rather than a wedding, Kiba said from where he leaned against the wall, already dressed in his own formal attire as one of Issei's groomsmen. Though I suppose in some ways, this is more terrifying than any battle we fought. Not helping, Kiba, Issei muttered, adjusting the collar of his robes for the 7th time. His hands were shaking slightly, and no amount of willpower seemed able to stop them. Calm yourself, partner, Drake rumbled from within the boosted gear. You've faced down gods without this level of anxiety. What's different about today? Everything, Issei thought desperately. In battle, I know what to do. Hit things until they stop being a problem. But this? How am I supposed to handle marrying two women simultaneously, one of whom is the mother of the other, in front of the entire devil nobility? The same way you handle everything else, Drake replied with surprising gentleness. With courage, determination, and the support of those who care about you. You are not alone in this, partner, remember that. The door opened, and Serzex Lucifer entered, his usual cheerful demeanor replaced with something more complex. As both one of the 4 Maos who ruled the underworld and Rias's older brother, His position in this ceremony was uniquely complicated. Issei-kun, Serzek said, his voice carefully neutral. How are you holding up? I've been better, Issei admitted. Also worse. This is somewhere in the middle of my personal scale of situations that make me want to run screaming. Serzek laughed, but there was a tension beneath it. I appreciate your honesty. I wanted to speak with you privately before the ceremony begins. May we have a moment alone? Kiba nodded and excused himself, closing the door behind him. Suddenly the room felt much smaller, and Issei was acutely aware that he was alone with one of the most powerful beings in existence, a being whose sister and mother he was about to marry. I'm not going to threaten you, Serzek said, reading Issei's expression. Though I imagine you're expecting something along those lines, the overprotective brother routine, perhaps, or the concerned son warning you to treat his mother well. The thought had crossed my mind, Issei said carefully. Serzek moved to the window, looking out over the gathering crowd below. The cathedral's grounds were filling with devils from every major house, along with representatives from other factions, angels, fallen angels, even some gods who had heard of this unprecedented event and come to witness it. I've known about the contract of crimson binding my entire life, Serzek said quietly. It was one of those ancient obligations that everyone assumed would never actually be triggered. The specific conditions were so unlikely, a Gremry defeating a Baal heir in single combat, with both parties meeting the exact bloodline requirements. What were the odds? He turned back to Issei, and his expression was complicated. And yet here we are. My sister, whom I love more than my own life, and my mother, who raised me and shaped me into who I am today, are both about to marry the same man. A young man who, just a few years ago, was an ordinary human teenager. I know it's strange, Issei began, but Serzek held up a hand. Strange doesn't begin to cover it. But I've had 3 weeks to process this, to consult with legal experts and magical scholars, to explore every possible alternative. There is none. The contract is absolute, and refusal means death for all parties involved. His eyes glowed with power for just a moment. And I will not lose my sister and mother to an ancient contract if there's any way to prevent it. So you approve? Issei asked. Approve is perhaps too strong a word, Serzek said with a slight smile. But I accept it. More than that, I've watched you, Issei Hayate. I've seen how you protect Rias, how you've grown from a perverted fool into a man of genuine character and strength. I've seen you face impossible odds and emerge victorious through sheer determination and loyalty to those you care about. He stepped closer, his expression serious. If anyone is going to be bound to my family in this way, I'm glad it's you. But understand this, you now carry the weight of 2 of the most important people in my life. Rias's happiness and mother's well-being are in your hands. That is a responsibility that goes far beyond any raiding game or battle. I understand, Issei said, meeting Serzek's gaze without flinching. I won't let either of them down. I swear it. Serzek studied him for a long moment, then nodded. I believe you. And now, as one of the officiating mouths, I need to explain what's about to happen. The ceremony is complex. Over the next 20 minutes, Serzek walked Issei through the ritual that would bind him to both Rias and Venelana. It was unlike any wedding ceremony from human tradition. There would be blood oaths, magical bindings, and a fusion of souls at a level that made Issei's head spin just thinking about it. The most critical moment is the triple binding, Serzek explained. All 3 of you will place your hands on the crimson altar, and your magical signatures will be woven together. It's permanent and absolute. Once completed, you'll be able to sense each other's emotions, share power in times of crisis, and be bound together until death and beyond. Beyond? Issei asked weakly. Devil marriages persist even into the afterlife, Serzek said. It's one reason we take them so seriously. This isn't just until death do us part. This is forever in the most literal sense. Before Issei could fully process that terrifying information, there was a knock at the door. Grafia Lucifuge, Serzek's wife and the head maid of the Gremry household, entered with her usual perfect composure. It's time, she announced. The guests are assembled. The mouths are in position, and the brides are ready. Issei-sama, if you would follow me. Issei took a deep breath, squared his shoulders, and followed Grafia out of the preparation chamber. As they walked through the cathedral's ancient corridors, He could hear the murmur of thousands of voices echoing through the vast space. Every major devil house had sent representatives, along with countless minor nobles, servants, and citizens who had come to witness history being made. The corridor opened into the main cathedral chamber, and Issei's breath caught in his throat. The space was enormous, easily large enough to hold 10,000 people, and it appeared that every seat was filled. Magical lights floated throughout the chamber, casting an otherworldly glow that made everything seem dreamlike. The aisle stretched before him like a crimson river, lined with white flames that burned without heat. At the far end stood the crimson altar, a massive structure of dark stone inlaid with veins of what looked like crystallized blood. And standing before the altar were the three other mouths, Ajuka Beelzebub, Seraphal Leviathan, and Falbium Asmodeus, all wearing their formal regalia and expressions of solemn authority. Behind them stood Zeoticus Gremory, his face carefully neutral as he prepared to witness his wife marry another man. "Courage, partner," Drake whispered. "Walk forward with your head held high. You are the Security. Act like it." Issei began his walk down the aisle, and immediately the murmuring grew louder. He could feel thousands of eyes on him, could hear snippets of conversation floating through the air. So young, how can he possibly? The Security, though, defeated 2 gods just last year. Unprecedented, absolutely unprecedented. Mother and daughter, can you imagine? Gremory family must be desperate to agree to this. Issei kept his eyes forward, refusing to look at the crowds, refusing to acknowledge the whispers and speculation. The occult research club sat in the front rows. Aquino, Kaneko, Kiba, Gasper, and the others, all dressed in formal attire and offering him encouraging smiles. Asia was crying already, clutching a handkerchief and looking radiantly happy despite the tears streaming down her face. His parents were there too, somehow, his human mother and father, looking completely overwhelmed but supportive. His mother caught his eye and gave him a watery smile and a thumbs up, which was so absurdly normal in this utterly abnormal situation that Issei almost laughed. As he reached the altar and took his position, Serzek stepped forward to stand with the other mouse. The 4 rulers of the underworld together represented the full authority of Devil Society, and their combined presence made this ceremony legally and magically unassailable. "We are gathered here," Ajuka began, his analytical voice carrying easily through the vast chamber, "to witness a binding that has not occurred in devil history for over a millennium, a triple marriage born of ancient contract and accepted by all parties willingly." The doors at the far end of the cathedral swung open, and music filled the air, not traditional wedding music, but something ancient and powerful that seemed to resonate in Issei's very bones. Every head turned to watch as the procession began. First came the attendants, young devils from various noble houses, scattering crimson petals along the aisle. Then came Milikas, Serzek's young son, carrying a ceremonial cushion that held 3 rings, each glowing with its own inner light. And then came the brides. Rias appeared first, and Issei's heart stopped. She wore a gown of deep crimson that seemed to be woven from starlight and shadow, form-fitting yet elegant, with a train that flowed behind her like liquid ruby. Her crimson hair was adorned with a crown of white flames that cast dancing shadows across her face, and her blue-green eyes were fixed on Issei with an intensity that made everything else fade away. Behind her walked Venelana, and the murmuring in the crowd increased dramatically. She wore a gown of silver and violet that complemented Rias's crimson perfectly, cut in a more mature style that somehow managed to be both modest and breathtaking. Her silver hair flowed freely down her back, adorned with crystals that caught the light and scattered it in rainbow patterns. Her violet eyes held a mixture of determination, resignation, and something that might have been hope. What struck Issei most forcefully was seeing them together like this, mother and daughter, walking side by side to marry the same man. The resemblance was obvious in their features, their bearing, their inherent grace. But where Rias radiated youthful passion and fierce determination, Venelana emanated mature wisdom and quiet strength. They reached the altar together, and for a moment, the 3 of them simply looked at each other. Issei saw his own nervousness reflected in Rias's eyes, saw Venelana's composed exterior crack just slightly to reveal the anxiety beneath. "We stand before the assembled witnesses," Seraphal announced, her usual playful demeanor replaced with ceremonial gravity, "to bind these 3 souls in matrimony according to the laws of devils and the demands of ancient contract. Let any who would object speak now or be forever silenced." The silence that followed was absolute. No one dared object to a ceremony overseen by all four mouths, even if they privately disapproved. Then let the ceremony commence, Falbium intoned. What followed was unlike anything Issei had ever experienced. The mouths led them through ritual after ritual, each one binding them more tightly together. They exchanged vows, Issei to both Rias and Venelana, and each of them to him. The words were ancient and powerful, carrying weight beyond their simple meaning. I, Issei Hayadu, take you, Rias Gremry, as my wife, to honor and protect, to cherish and support, from this moment until the end of eternity. I, Issei Hayadu, take you, Venelana Gremry, as my wife, to honor and protect, to cherish and support, from this moment until the end of eternity. Their responses echoed his own commitment, and with each word, Issei felt something shifting in his chest, a warmth spreading through his body that was unlike any power he'd ever channeled. Then came the blood oath. All three of them cut their palms with a ceremonial blade, and their blood mingled in a crystal chalice. The mixture glowed with crimson light, then was poured over the crimson altar, where it was absorbed into the stone. Blood calls to blood, Ajuka intoned. Let these three become one family, bound by the oldest magic. The rings came next, not ordinary rings, but bands of crystallized power that would grow and change with them. Issei slipped one onto Rias's finger, then onto Venelana's, and each of them placed a ring on his hand. The metal was warm, almost alive, and seemed to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat. Finally came the triple binding that Serzex had warned him about. The three of them placed their hands together on the crimson altar, and power exploded through the cathedral. Issei gasped as he felt his magical signature intertwining with two others, Rias's familiar warmth and passion, and Venelana's deep, steady strength. It was intimate beyond anything he'd imagined, like having his very soul exposed and merged with theirs. He could feel their emotions, their fears, their hopes, their love and anxiety all mixing together into something greater than any individual feeling. The light from the altar blazed brighter and brighter, until the entire cathedral was bathed in crimson radiance. Issei heard gasps and cries of amazement from the assembled crowd, but he couldn't focus on anything except the connection forming between himself, Rias, and Venelana. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the light faded. The connection remained, but it settled into something he could live with, a constant awareness of his wife's presence in the back of his mind, a bond that would never break. By the authority vested in us as the four mouths of the underworld, Serzex announced, his voice ringing through the chamber, we declare these three to be bound in matrimony. What has been joined here cannot be separated by any power in this world or the next. Issei Hayadu, you may kiss your brides. For a moment, Issei froze. This was it. The moment that would make everything real, that would seal his fate before thousands of witnesses. He turned to Rias first, seeing the love and trust in her eyes, and leaned in to kiss her. It was sweet and familiar, carrying the promise of their long relationship and the hope for their future. Then he turned to Venelana, and hesitation filled him. This was different. This was his mother-in-law, a woman centuries old, someone he'd never imagined kissing in any context. But her violet eyes held understanding and acceptance, and she leaned forward slightly, giving him permission. The kiss was gentle, respectful, and far more significant than he'd expected. It wasn't passionate like kissing Rias, but it carried its own weight, a promise of mutual respect, of commitment to making this impossible situation work, of building something meaningful from duty and obligation. When they separated, the crowd erupted. Some were cheering, some were stunned into silence, some were clearly disapproving, but everyone was reacting. The ceremony was complete. Issei Hayadu was now married to both Rias Gremry and her mother, Venelana Gremry, in a binding that would last for eternity. As they turned to face the assembled devils, Issei felt Rias take his right hand and Venelana take his left, just as they had in Xiaticus's office 3 weeks ago. Together, they walked back down the aisle as the crowd continued to react in 1,000 different ways. Well done, partner, Drake said with what sounded like genuine pride. You've just accomplished something no one in history has managed. You've married a mother and daughter simultaneously and survived the experience. Though I suppose the real challenge is still ahead of you. Don't remind me, Issei thought, but despite his nervousness, he couldn't help but feel a strange sense of accomplishment. He'd taken the first step into this new life. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The reception that followed was held in the grand hall of the Gremry estate, a space that could comfortably hold several thousand devils and their retinues. The celebration was elaborate beyond anything Issei had experienced. Magical displays filled the air, tables groaned under the weight of delicacies from across the underworld and beyond, and music played by beings who had been perfecting their craft for millennia filled every corner of the hall. But Issei could barely enjoy any of it. He was too aware of the stares, the whispers, the constant attention from every devil in attendance. He sat at the head table with Rias on his right and Venelana on his left, with Xiaticus seated next to Venelana in a position that must have been deeply uncomfortable for everyone involved. "Relax," Rias whispered, squeezing his hand under the table. "You're doing fine. Just get through the reception, and then we can retreat to our private quarters." "Our private quarters," Issei repeated weakly. "Right. Where the three of us will be living together. As spouses?" "In every sense. One step at a time," Venelana murmured from his other side. "Tonight is about surviving the public scrutiny. We can worry about the private implications tomorrow." The reception continued with speech after speech from various nobles, each one either carefully congratulating the union or making veiled comments about its unusual nature. The Phoenix family seemed particularly uncomfortable, given that Rias had once been engaged to Riser. Lord Phoenix gave a speech that was diplomatically neutral but clearly strained. When it came time for Xiaticus to speak, the entire hall fell silent. Every eye turned to the man whose wife had just married another, waiting to see how he would handle this impossible situation. Xiaticus stood, his expression unreadable, and raised his glass. 3 weeks ago, I learned that my wife of nearly 400 years would be marrying another man due to an ancient contract. My first instinct was rage. My second was denial. My third was to search for any possible alternative. The crowd was utterly silent, hanging on every word. But as I watched the three of them, my daughter, my wife, and the young man who had won both their respect, I realized something important. This is not a tragedy. This is not a loss. This is an opportunity for our family to grow in ways I never anticipated. He turned to look at Issei, Rias, and Venelana. "Issei Hayadu, you have proven yourself worthy of the Gremry name time and again. You have protected my daughter, honored our house, and faced this impossible situation with more courage than most could muster. I welcome you fully into this family, not as an outsider bound by contract, but as a true son of Gremry." Xiaticus raised his glass higher. "To the newlyweds, may your union bring strength to our families, may your bond endure all challenges, and may you find happiness in this most unusual of circumstances." To Issei, Rias, and Venelana, the hall erupted in response, and Issei felt tears stinging his eyes. He hadn't realized how much Xiaticus's acceptance meant until this moment, when the older devil had publicly given his blessing to this bizarre arrangement. The rest of the reception passed in a blur. Issei danced with Rias, then with Venelana, then with various noble ladies who wanted to curry favor or simply satisfy their curiosity. He ate food he couldn't taste, drank wine that went straight to his head, and smiled until his face hurt. Finally, mercifully, Grafia approached and informed them that it was time to retire to their private quarters. The newlyweds were expected to spend their first night together in seclusion, and while Issei had been dreading this moment, he was also grateful to escape the constant scrutiny. The walk to their new quarters felt like a death march. Rias held his right hand, Venelana held his left, and various servants and family members accompanied them through the corridors of the Gremry estate. Finally, they reached a set of ornate double doors that led to what would be their private suite, a space that had been specially prepared for the three of them. The doors closed behind them, leaving them alone for the first time as husband and wives. The suite was enormous, a central living area connected to multiple bedrooms, a bathing chamber that looked like it belonged in a palace, and various other rooms whose purposes Issei couldn't even guess. But what drew his attention most was the massive bed visible through the open door of the master bedroom, easily large enough for 3 people. "So," Issei said weakly, "here we are." "Here we are," Rias echoed, and despite everything, she was smiling. "Issei, I know this is overwhelming. I know tonight has been impossibly difficult. But we made it through. We're married now, legally and magically bound for eternity. And we don't have to rush anything," Venelana added, gracefully settling onto one of the luxurious couches that dominated the living area. The contract is fulfilled. The ceremony is complete. We can take our time figuring out how this actually works. Issei felt some of the tension drain from his shoulders. Really? Because I was kind of worried that there would be expectations about tonight, given that it's our wedding night and all. Both women exchanged glances, and Issei could feel something passing between them through the bond they now shared, amusement mixed with understanding and their own nervousness. Issei, Rias said gently, sitting beside her mother on the couch and gesturing for him to join them, you've just been through one of the most stressful experiences possible. You married two women in a ceremony witnessed by thousands, bonded your soul to both of us permanently, and dealt with hours of public scrutiny. If you're not ready for physical intimacy tonight, that's completely understandable. More than understandable, Venelana agreed. Despite what certain romance novels might suggest, it's perfectly acceptable for newlyweds to simply talk, to learn about each other, to build comfort and trust before progressing to more intimate acts. Issei sat down across from them, studying their faces. Rias looked relieved at her mother's words, which suggested she was probably as nervous as he was. Venelana's expression was harder to read, but he thought he detected similar feelings beneath her composed exterior. Can I ask you both something? Issei said. Honestly? Always, Rias replied. Are you two okay? Like really okay with all this? Because I know we didn't have a choice. But now that it's done, now that we're actually married, how are you feeling? Rias was quiet for a moment, then smiled softly. Honestly? I'm terrified and relieved in equal measure. Terrified because I'm sharing my husband with my mother, which is so far outside normal that I don't even have a framework for processing it. But relieved because you're here, because you chose to go through with this, because I'm not losing you. She reached out and took his hand. I love you, Issei. I've loved you for years. And yes, this isn't the marriage I imagined when I dreamed about our future together, but it's the marriage we have, and I'm determined to make it work. Venelana was silent for longer, her violet eyes distant. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of her centuries. I am conflicted. I married Xiaticus 400 years ago, and I built a life with him, raised children with him, governed a territory with him. That doesn't simply disappear because of a new marriage, even one as binding as this. She looked at Issei directly. But I also recognize that this is my reality now. I am bound to you as truly as I am to Xiaticus, perhaps more so given the nature of the triple binding. I will honor that bond. I will be a proper wife to you, Issei-kun, in all the ways that entails. It may take time for my heart to catch up with my obligations, but I will try. That's all any of us can do. The honesty in her words struck Issei deeply. This was what he'd asked for, complete honesty, no matter how uncomfortable. And both of them were delivering. Thank you, he said quietly. Both of you. For being honest, for being willing to try, for not making this any harder than it has to be. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the stress and exhaustion of the day beginning to catch up with all of them. Finally, Venelana stood gracefully. I think, she said, that we should all get some rest. It's been an exceptionally long day, and tomorrow will bring its own challenges as the underworld reacts to what we've done. She glanced at the master bedroom, then at the other bedrooms branching off from the main suite. Perhaps tonight, we should take advantage of having multiple rooms available. Give ourselves space to process everything. That sounds perfect, Rias said, relief evident in her voice. Yeah, Issei agreed. Space sounds good. As they prepared to separate for the night, Issei felt a mix of relief and disappointment that he couldn't quite explain. Part of him was grateful for the reprieve, but another part wondered if they were simply delaying the inevitable. You're overthinking this, partner, Drake observed. Take the time you're being offered. Building a marriage, especially one this complicated, is a marathon, not a sprint. Before heading to their respective rooms, Rias stepped close to Issei and kissed him gently. Good night, husband, she whispered against his lips. I love you. I love you too, Issei replied, holding her for a moment longer before letting her go. Venelana approached more tentatively, and for a moment, Issei thought she might simply bow or nod. But then she leaned in and kissed his cheek, her lips soft and warm. Good night, Issei-kun, she said quietly. Thank you for your patience with this complicated situation. We'll find our way through it together. As Issei finally collapsed onto the bed in one of the smaller bedrooms, still wearing his formal robes because he was too exhausted to change, he reflected on the enormous step they'd all taken today. He was married now, truly, legally, magically married to both Rias Gremory and her mother Venelana. His life had taken yet another impossible turn, but as he drifted off to sleep, feeling the constant presence of his wives in the back of his mind through their bond, Issei realized that he wouldn't have it any other way. They would make this work, somehow. Together. The morning after the wedding arrived with a peculiar sort of awkwardness that Issei had never quite experienced before. He woke in the unfamiliar bedroom, still wearing his rumpled formal robes from the ceremony, and for a blissful few seconds, he forgot where he was and what had happened. Then memory crashed back like a tidal wave, and he sat bolt upright in bed. He was married. To 2 women. One of whom was the mother of the other. "Good morning, partner," Drake rumbled with what sounded suspiciously like amusement. "How does it feel to wake up as possibly the most controversial husband in devil history?" "Too early for your commentary, Drake." "It's never too early for commentary. Besides, you should probably get up. I can sense both of your wives are already awake, and there's someone else approaching your door." Before Issei could process that information, there was a polite knock. "Issei-sama? Are you awake?" "It's Grafia." Issei scrambled out of bed, hastily trying to smooth down his robes and hair before opening the door. Grafia stood in the corridor with her usual perfect composure, though Issei thought he detected the faintest hint of amusement in her eyes. "Good morning, Issei-sama," she said with a slight bow. "I trust you slept well?" Yeah, I guess," Issei said, acutely aware of how disheveled he must look compared to her immaculate appearance. "Is something wrong?" "Not at all. I simply came to inform you that breakfast has been prepared in the private dining room, and that Lord Surzex wishes to speak with you, Lady Rias, and Lady Venelana after you've eaten. Also," she paused, and now Issei was certain he saw amusement, "you should probably change out of your ceremonial robes before joining your wives. They're already dressed for the day." Heat flooded Issei's face. "Right. Yeah. I'll do that. Thanks, Grafia." As she departed, Issei retreated back into his room and finally took the time to properly look around. Someone, probably an army of servants, had already moved his belongings into this space. His clothes hung in an ornate wardrobe, his personal items were arranged on various shelves and tables, and everything had been organized with a precision that made his old bedroom back in the human world look like a disaster zone by comparison. After a quick shower in the attached bathroom, which was larger than his entire old bedroom and featured water that somehow maintained the perfect temperature without any visible controls, Issei dressed in casual clothes and ventured out into the main living area of their suite. The sight that greeted him made him stop in his tracks. Rias and Venelana sat together at a small breakfast table near the windows, morning light streaming in around them. They were talking quietly, heads close together in a way that spoke of a lifetime of mother-daughter intimacy. Rias wore a simple but elegant dress in deep blue, while Venelana was dressed in a flowing gown of silver that somehow managed to be both casual and regal simultaneously. What struck Issei most was how natural they looked together, not as 2 women bound to the same man by magical contract, but simply as mother and daughter sharing a morning meal. For a moment, he felt like an intruder, someone who didn't belong in this intimate scene. Then Rias looked up and saw him, and her face lit up with a smile that banished his doubts. "Issei. Good morning. Come join us. The food is amazing." Venelana turned as well, her expression warm. "Good morning, Issei-kun. I hope you slept well. Rias and I were just discussing the rather overwhelming number of wedding gifts that arrived overnight." As Issei settled into a chair at the table, he saw that they weren't exaggerating. Through the open door to another room, he could see what looked like hundreds of elaborately wrapped packages, each one undoubtedly from some noble house or important figure trying to curry favor or express congratulations. "We'll need to spend days just opening them all," Rias said with a sigh. "And then we'll need to send thank you notes to everyone, which means dealing with devil politics and social protocols for weeks. Can't we just, I don't know, send a mass thank you?" Issei asked, reaching for what looked like some kind of pastry from the impressive spread before them. Both women looked at him with identical expressions of amused horror, and Issei was struck by how similar they could be despite their age difference. Issei-kun, Venelana said gently, you are now married into one of the most prominent noble houses in the underworld. Every gift represents a political statement, an alliance offered, or a relationship being maintained. Responding appropriately is not optional. Welcome to Devil Nobility, Rias added with a wry smile, where even saying thank you requires strategic planning. They ate breakfast together, and despite the strangeness of the situation, Issei found himself relaxing. The conversation flowed easily, touching on everything from the ceremony to the various reactions they'd witnessed to speculation about what the underworld's gossip networks were saying this morning. I heard from Aquino, Rias mentioned, that several betting pools have started regarding various aspects of our marriage. Apparently, people are wagering on everything from how long it will last to which of us will produce an heir first. Issei choked on his juice. They're betting on that? Devils are inveterate gamblers, Venelana said with a slight smile. Particularly when it comes to noble family drama. I imagine our situation will provide entertainment for years to come. Speaking of entertainment, Rias said, her tone becoming more serious, Surzex wants to meet with us after breakfast. He didn't say why, but given the timing, I suspect it has something to do with what happens next. What happens next? Issei asked. I mean, we're married now. The contract is fulfilled. Don't we just live our lives? Venelana and Rias exchanged glances, and Issei felt something pass between them through the bond they all shared, a mixture of anticipation and nervousness. There's a tradition, Venelana began carefully, among devil nobility. After a wedding of significant importance, the newlyweds are expected to take a honeymoon period, a time away from the public eye, from political pressures, from outside interference. A chance to establish their new relationship in private. A honeymoon, Issei repeated. Right. That makes sense, I guess. Where would we go? Some resort in the underworld? Not exactly, Rias said, her cheeks coloring slightly. Given the unique nature of our marriage, and the intense public scrutiny we're facing, Surzex has arranged something special. A private dimension, completely isolated from the outside world, where the three of us can spend time together without any distractions or interruptions. Issei's mind immediately went to all the implications of being alone with both of them in a private dimension, and his face must have shown his thoughts because Venelana laughed softly. We're not going to throw you into the deep end, Issei-kun, she said. The dimension has been prepared with multiple living spaces, recreational areas, and plenty of room for us to have privacy when needed. Think of it as a very large, very private vacation home rather than a single romantic cottage. How long would we be there? Issei asked. Traditionally, a noble honeymoon lasts 1 month, Rias explained. Which in a time-dilated dimension could be even longer subjectively. Surzex mentioned something about a 3-to-1 time ratio, meaning we could spend 3 months inside while only 1 month passes in the real world. 3 months. Alone with both Rias and her mother. 3 months to figure out how this impossible marriage was supposed to work. 3 months where they would have to confront all the intimacies and complications they'd been avoiding. This could be good for you, partner, Drake observed. Time away from outside pressures to genuinely build these relationships. Though I expect it will also be extraordinarily awkward at times. You think? We don't have to decide right now, Venelana said, though Issei sensed she already knew what the decision would be. Let's hear what Surzex has to say first. They finished breakfast and made their way through the Gremry estate to Surzex's private office. The castle was bustling with activity, servants cleaning up from the previous night's reception, guards changing shifts, various nobles and officials coming and going on business. Many of them stopped to stare at the three newlyweds, and Issei could feel the weight of their gazes, their curiosity, their judgment. By the time they reached Surzex's office, Issei was grateful for the privacy. The Mao Lucifer sat behind his desk, but he stood and smiled warmly as they entered. Congratulations again, he said, gesturing for them to sit. I wanted to speak with you before the demands of the day begin piling up. As I'm sure you've realized, your marriage is going to be the subject of intense interest for quite some time. Every move you make will be scrutinized, analyzed, and gossiped about. We're aware, Rias said dryly. Aquino already told us about the betting pools, Surzex grimaced. Yes, well, that's actually part of why I wanted to suggest the honeymoon dimension. It will give you time away from all of this, time to establish your relationship without constant observation. The dimension has been specially prepared and is completely secure. No one can access it except the three of you, and no one can observe what happens inside. How long would you recommend we stay? Venelana asked. As long as you need, Surzex replied. The time dilation can be adjusted. You could spend months inside while only weeks pass out here, or you could keep it to a 1-to-1 ratio if you prefer. The choice is entirely yours. He leaned forward, his expression becoming more serious. But I do strongly recommend taking this time. Your marriage is unprecedented, and it's going to face challenges unlike anything most couples deal with. Having a period of isolation to work through the initial complications could make the difference between success and failure. What kind of dimension is it? Issei asked. I mean, what's actually there? Surzex smiled. I'll let you discover that for yourselves. But I can tell you it's been designed to be comfortable, beautiful, and large enough that you can have both privacy and togetherness as needed. There are libraries, training areas, recreational facilities, and living quarters that should suit your needs. He stood and walked to a cabinet, from which he withdrew a small crystal sphere that pulsed with inner light. This is the access key. When you're ready to enter the dimension, simply channel your power into it together. When you're ready to return, do the same from inside. Simple as that. Rias took the sphere carefully, studying it with interest. And you're certain no one can breach the dimension? Absolutely certain, Surzex confirmed. I had Ajuka design it personally. Even I couldn't enter without your permission. You'll be completely safe and completely private. There was a moment of silence as the three of them considered the implications. Finally, Venelana spoke. I think we should do it, she said quietly. Surzex is right. We need time away from the scrutiny, time to truly understand what our marriage means and how it will function. We can't do that here, where every moment is observed and judged. I agree, Rias added. As much as I'd love to just dive back into normal life, I know that's not realistic. We need this time. Both women looked at Issei, and he felt the weight of their expectations through the bond they shared. This was a decision they needed to make together, as equals in this strange marriage. Okay, Issei said finally. Let's do it. 3 months inside, 1 month outside. Let's actually figure out how to make this work. The relief that flowed through their bond was palpable, and Issei realized that both women had been worried he might refuse, might want to rush back to the familiar rather than face the complications of their new reality. Excellent, Surzex said, genuine pleasure in his voice. When would you like to depart? Today, Venelana said decisively. There's no point in delaying. The sooner we go, the sooner we can begin building our life together, and the sooner we can escape the gossip and staring, Rias muttered. Surzex laughed. Fair enough. I'll have everything prepared. You'll want to pack some personal items, though the dimension is well stocked with clothing, supplies, and everything else you might need. Plan to depart this afternoon? They agreed, and after a few more details were worked out, they left Surzex's office and returned to their suite to prepare. The next few hours were a flurry of activity, packing bags, sorting through the most important wedding gifts, sending messages to friends and family, and generally preparing to be away from the world for what would feel like 3 months. As the afternoon arrived, they gathered in a specially prepared ritual chamber in the depths of the Gremery estate. Surzex was there, along with Grafia and a few other family members who had come to see them off. Ziaticus stood somewhat apart from the others, his expression complex as he prepared to watch his wife depart for an extended honeymoon with another man. Be well, he said simply, looking at all three of them. And, be good to each other. Your family now, in all the ways that matter. Venelana stepped close to him, and kissed his cheek gently. Thank you, she whispered. For understanding. For accepting. For being the man I've loved for 4 centuries. I'll still be that man when you return, Ziaticus replied quietly. We'll figure out how this works, all of us. With final farewells made, the three of them stood together in the center of the ritual circle. Rias held the crystal sphere, and at a nod from Surzex, they each placed a hand on it. Power flowed from all three of them into the sphere, their magical signatures intertwining just as they had during the wedding ceremony. The crystal blazed with light, and reality began to tear open around them. "Good luck," Surzex called as the dimensional portal expanded. "And remember, take all the time you need. Don't rush this." The world dissolved into light and color, and then they were falling through space that wasn't quite space, time that wasn't quite time. Issei felt Rias's hand in his right and Venelana's in his left, felt their presence through the bond, felt their combined nervousness and anticipation. And then they were somewhere else entirely. The honeymoon dimension was breathtaking. They stood on a marble terrace overlooking a landscape that seemed to combine the best elements of dozens of different worlds. Rolling hills covered in flowers of impossible colors stretched to distant mountains whose peaks glowed with eternal sunset. A vast lake sparkled in the middle distance, its waters so clear they seemed made of liquid crystal. The sky above was a swirl of colors that shifted and changed, never quite settling on day or night but maintaining a perpetual golden twilight that was beautiful beyond words. Behind them stood a mansion, no, a palace, of elegant design that somehow managed to feel both grand and intimate. Multiple wings stretched out from a central structure, suggesting plenty of space for privacy, while terraces and gardens connected everything together. "Wow," Issei breathed. This is incredible." Ajuka outdid himself, Rias agreed, looking around with wide eyes. "I've never seen anything quite like this." Venelana was quiet, but Issei could feel her appreciation through their bond. After a moment, she spoke. "Shall we explore our home for the next 3 months?" They spent the next hour investigating the dimension, discovering its various features with increasing amazement. The palace had more rooms than they could count, bedrooms of various sizes and styles, bathrooms that were small paradises unto themselves, libraries filled with books from across all dimensions, training halls equipped with every type of weapon and magical tool imaginable, recreational rooms with games and entertainment options, and kitchens that were somehow always stocked with fresh food despite the dimension being sealed. What struck Issei most was the thoughtfulness of the design. There was a clear master suite, obviously intended for all 3 of them, but there were also smaller private bedrooms for each of them individually. There were intimate spaces designed for couples, but also larger gathering areas for all 3 together. It was as if Ajuka had anticipated every possible configuration of their unusual relationship, and designed spaces to accommodate each one. He really thought of everything, Rias marveled as they discovered a hot spring bath large enough for a dozen people hidden in a garden behind the palace. "This must have taken enormous effort to create." "It's a gift," Venelana said softly. "From my son to his sister and mother, giving us the best possible chance to make this work." They eventually settled in one of the more casual living areas, a comfortable room with large windows overlooking the lake. The 3 of them sat together, and for a long moment, no one spoke. The reality of their situation was sinking in. They were alone now, completely isolated from the outside world, with 3 months stretching ahead of them to figure out how their marriage would actually function. "So," Issei said finally, "what do we do first?" Rias and Venelana looked at each other, and something passed between them, a decision made, an understanding reached. "First," Venelana said, "we establish some ground rules. Some guidelines for how we're going to approach these 3 months together." "Ground rules?" Issei asked. "Communication rules," Rias clarified. "We already agreed to be honest with each other always, but we need to get more specific. What do we do when someone feels uncomfortable? How do we handle conflicts? How do we ensure everyone's needs are being met?" Over the next several hours they talked. Really talked, in a way they hadn't been able to since the contract was triggered. They discussed expectations, fears, hopes, and boundaries. They acknowledged the awkwardness of their situation, while also committing to working through it. "I think," Venelana said at one point, "that we need to acknowledge that this is going to be different for all of us. Issei, you're young and this is essentially your first serious relationship, let alone marriage. Rias, you're in love with Issei but now sharing him with your mother. And I'm centuries old, married for 400 years, and now bound to a young man while still loving my first husband. We're all dealing with complications. So what do we do about those complications?" Issei asked. "We give each other grace," Rias said simply. "We accept that there will be awkward moments, uncomfortable situations, and times when this doesn't feel natural. But we keep trying anyway." They agreed to a flexible schedule for their time in the dimension, some activities they would do all together, some they would do in pairs, and some they would do individually. They agreed that any two of them could spend time alone without the third feeling excluded. They agreed to weekly family meetings where they would discuss how things were going and address any issues that arose. Most importantly, they agreed to take things at whatever pace felt right, without pressure or expectations. The physical aspect of our marriage, Venelana said delicately, is something we'll approach when we're ready. There's no timeline, no schedule we must adhere to. When it happens, it will be because all parties genuinely want it, not because we feel obligated. The relief Issei felt at those words must have been obvious, because both women smiled. Did you think we were going to demand immediate consummation? Rias asked with gentle amusement. Maybe a little, Issei admitted sheepishly. We're married for eternity, Venelana reminded him. We have literally all the time in the world. There's no need to rush. As evening fell, or what passed for evening in the eternal twilight of the dimension, they shared a meal together in one of the smaller dining rooms. The food was delicious, the conversation flowed easily, and for the first time since this whole situation began, Issei felt like maybe, just maybe, they could actually make this work. After dinner, they agreed to retire to separate bedrooms for the night. They were all exhausted from the emotional intensity of the past 2 days, and the thought of collapsing into bed alone was appealing to everyone. But as Issei prepared for bed in one of the private rooms, he found himself thinking about the 2 women in other parts of this palace. His wives, one he'd loved for years, one he was only beginning to know in this new context. Both of them dealing with their own complications, their own fears, their own hopes for what they were building together. Through the bond, he could sense them, Rias's familiar warmth tinged with nervous excitement, Venelana's deeper, steadier presence marked by determination and cautious optimism. They were all in this together, bound by magic and contract, and, increasingly, by genuine choice. Not a bad start, partner, Drake observed. You've established communication, set boundaries, and given yourselves permission to take things slowly. That's more wisdom than most newlyweds manage. I just hope it's enough, Issei thought. 3 months is a long time, and a short time, in the scope of eternity. Sleep now. Tomorrow begins the real work of building your marriage. As Issei drifted off to sleep in his comfortable bed, surrounded by luxury beyond anything he'd ever experienced, he felt a strange sense of peace. Yes, his life had taken the most bizarre turn imaginable. Yes, he was married to both his girlfriend and her mother in a situation that defied all conventional understanding, but he wasn't facing it alone. And somehow, that made all the difference. Tomorrow they would begin truly learning how to be married. Tonight they could rest, secure in the knowledge that they had time, privacy, and each other. It was enough. For now, it was more than enough. The dimensional portal shimmered and collapsed behind them as Issei, Rias, and Venelana stepped back into the ritual chamber deep within the Gremory estate. To the outside world, only 1 month had passed since they departed. For the 3 of them, it had been 3 months, 90 days of isolation, discovery, and transformation that had fundamentally changed their relationship in ways that would have seemed impossible before they left. Issei took a deep breath, adjusting to the familiar magical signature of the underworld after so long in the honeymoon dimension. He felt different somehow, more centered, more confident, more comfortable in his own skin. The bond he shared with his wives had deepened considerably, becoming less of a constant presence he had to consciously acknowledge and more of a natural extension of his own awareness. "Welcome back," Serzek said, stepping forward with a warm smile. He studied the 3 of them carefully, and Issei saw satisfaction in the Mao's eyes. "You all look well. I take it the honeymoon was productive?" "That's one way to put it," Rias replied, and there was something different in her voice too, a confidence, a contentment that hadn't been there before. She stood close to Issei, her hand naturally finding his, while Venelana stood on his other side in a configuration that had become second nature over the past 3 months. Venelana smiled slightly. "The dimension was perfect, brother. Thank you for arranging it. We were able to spend time together without external pressures, which was exactly what we needed." Ziaticus stood somewhat apart from Serzek's, and Issei felt a moment of awkwardness. The older devil's expression was carefully neutral as he looked at his wife, who had just returned from 3 months alone with another man, and their daughter. "Ziaticus," Venelana said softly, moving to stand before her first husband. We need to talk. Not here, but soon. There are things we need to discuss about how our marriages will coexist. I know, Xioticus replied, his voice heavy with emotion Issei couldn't quite identify. I've had a month to prepare myself for this conversation. We'll talk tonight if you're willing. Of course. Venelana touched his arm gently, and Issei felt a complicated swirl of emotions through their bond: love for Xioticus, guilt about the situation, determination to make both marriages work. It was a reminder that their unusual arrangement affected more than just the three of them. I hate to rush you, Cerzex said apologetically, but there are several matters that require your attention. The underworld has been active during your absence. Active how? Rias asked, her tone immediately sharpening. Let's discuss this in my office, Cerzex suggested. Grafia has prepared refreshments, and we have much to cover. As they made their way through the Gremery estate to Cerzex's office, Issei couldn't help but notice the stares from servants and guards. They were different from the stares before the honeymoon, less curious, more assessing. Word must have spread that the newlyweds had returned, and everyone wanted to see what 3 months together had done to their unusual relationship. Cerzex's office was as impressive as always, but now Grafia had arranged comfortable seating and a spread of food and drinks that suggested they would be there for a while. Once everyone was settled, Cerzex's expression became serious. First, the good news, he began. Your marriage has been formally recognized by all major devil houses and has been recorded in the official archives. There were some grumbles from conservative factions, but nothing that rose to the level of real opposition. The precedent has been set. And the bad news? Venelana asked, ever perceptive. The attention hasn't died down at all, Cerzex said with a sigh. If anything, it's intensified during your absence. Every major news outlet in the underworld has been speculating about your honeymoon, your relationship dynamics, and what this means for devil society going forward. You've become celebrities in the worst possible way. Wonderful, Rias muttered. I was hoping people would move on to the next scandal. Unfortunately, there hasn't been a next scandal, Cerzex said. Your marriage is simply too unprecedented, too fascinating to the general population. The betting pools I mentioned have only grown. There are now entire forums dedicated to discussing and analyzing every aspect of your relationship. Issei felt his face heating up. They're discussing us? Like everything? Everything they can speculate about, Cerzex confirmed. Which is why I wanted to brief you before you venture back into public society. You need to be prepared for the level of scrutiny you'll face. How bad is it really? Venelana asked. Grafia stepped forward, producing what looked like several newspapers and magazines from the underworld. The headlines were bold and invasive. Triple marriage, paradise or powder keg? Sources close to Gremery Estate speculate on honeymoon details. Devil psychologists debate the viability of mother-daughter marriage. Security's unusual family, a new model or a disaster waiting to happen. Issei felt anger rising in his chest as he scanned the articles. Many of them were invasive, speculative, and based on nothing but rumor and assumption. Some were sympathetic, treating their situation with respect and curiosity. Others were openly hostile, declaring their marriage an abomination that would inevitably fail. This is insane, Rias said, her own anger evident. How dare they? They dare because we're public figures now, Venelana interrupted gently, though her eyes flashed with irritation. This is the price of being part of a noble house, magnified by the unusual nature of our situation. We knew this would happen. Knowing and experiencing are different things, Issei growled. Through the bond, he could feel both women's anger mixing with his own, and for a moment, the three of them were perfectly aligned in their indignation. I understand your frustration, Cerzex said. But I need you to channel it productively. Getting into public arguments with journalists or responding to every critic will only make things worse. The best response is to simply live your lives, demonstrate that your marriage works, and let time prove the skeptics wrong. Easier said than done, Rias muttered. I know. Which brings me to my next point. You'll need to make some public appearances soon. The longer you hide away, the more people will speculate. Better to show yourselves, present a united front, and make it clear that you're not ashamed or troubled by your situation. What kind of appearances? Issei asked warily. A formal dinner with several noble houses would be a good start, Cerzex suggested. Nothing too elaborate, but enough to show that you're back and functioning as a cohesive unit. After that, perhaps attending some social events, maybe even a rating game if Rias's peerage is ready. Actually, Rias said, perking up slightly, a rating game might be perfect. It would let us show that our situation hasn't affected my ability to lead my peerage, and it would give people something else to focus on besides our marriage. Excellent thinking, Serzex approved. I'll arrange for a match to be scheduled within the next few weeks. That will give you time to readjust and train. They spent the next hour discussing various logistical matters, official duties that had accumulated during their absence, social obligations that needed to be fulfilled, political situations that required attention. It was overwhelming, a stark contrast to the peaceful isolation of the honeymoon dimension. Finally, as the meeting wound down, Serzex looked at the three of them with something approaching brotherly concern. How are you really doing? Forget the politics and the public scrutiny for a moment. As people, as a family, how are you? The question hung in the air, and Issei felt both women considering how to answer. Finally, he spoke up. We're okay, he said simply. Better than okay, actually. The 3 months together helped us figure out how this actually works. We're still learning, still adjusting, but we're doing it together, and that makes all the difference. Rias squeezed his hand. What he said? It's still complicated, still unusual, but it's ours. We've built something that works for us, and that's what matters. I'm proud of all of you, Serzex said genuinely. Truly. What you've accomplished in 3 months is remarkable. Now you just need to maintain it while dealing with the outside world. As they left Serzex's office and made their way back to their private suite, Issei felt the weight of reality settling back onto his shoulders. The peaceful bubble of the honeymoon dimension was well and truly popped. Now they had to navigate their marriage while dealing with public scrutiny, political pressures, and the judgment of thousands. Welcome back to the real world, partner, Drake observed dryly. I trust you're ready for the challenges ahead? As ready as I'll ever be. At least I'm not facing them alone. True. And your bond has strengthened considerably. I can feel it. The three of you are far more unified than when you left. That will serve you well. Back in their suite, they found that it had been prepared for their return. Fresh flowers adorned every surface, the rooms had been cleaned until they sparkled, and someone had thoughtfully stocked the kitchen and various rooms with their favorite items. It's good to be home, Rias said, though there was a wistful note in her voice. Though I have to admit, part of me misses the dimension. It was nice not being watched constantly. We can always request access again if we need a break, Venelana pointed out. But Serzex is right. We need to engage with the world, not hide from it. Running away will only make the speculation worse. They settled into the main living area, and for a while, they simply sat together in comfortable silence. Over the 3 months in the dimension, they'd learned to appreciate these quiet moments, times when they didn't need to fill the air with conversation but could simply exist in each other's presence. The bond between them hummed contentedly, and Issei marveled at how natural it had become. He could sense Rias's thoughts turning toward her peerage, mentally planning training regimens and strategies for the upcoming raiding game. He could feel Venelana's mind working through the political complications they would face, already strategizing how to handle various social situations. And they could sense him too, his nervousness about returning to public life, his determination to protect both of them from the worst of the scrutiny, his growing confidence in their relationship despite its unconventional nature. We should probably discuss something, Venelana said eventually, her tone careful. The outside world will be watching for signs of how our marriage functions. They'll be looking for cracks, for conflicts, for any indication that this arrangement is failing. So we don't give them any, Rias said firmly. It's not that simple, dear. We will have disagreements. We will have moments of friction. That's normal for any marriage, let alone one as complex as ours. The question is how we handle those moments in public. We present a united front, Issei said, understanding where Venelana was going. We save our disagreements for private, and in public, we support each other completely. Exactly. It's not about hiding problems or pretending everything is perfect. It's about not giving our critics ammunition. We handle our issues internally, as a family, and we show the world a partnership that's strong and functional. I can do that, Rias agreed. And honestly, after 3 months together, I think we're better equipped to handle conflicts than most couples. We've already worked through so much. That was true. The honeymoon had been far from perfect. They'd had awkward moments, difficult conversations, and times when the strangeness of their situation had seemed overwhelming. But they'd worked through all of it, emerging with a relationship that, while unconventional, was genuinely functional and increasingly comfortable. A knock at the door interrupted their conversation. Grafia entered at Rias's invitation, her expression professionally neutral. "Forgive the intrusion," she said with a slight bow. "But there are several matters requiring attention. First, the Occult Research Club has requested an audience. They're eager to welcome you back and hear about your honeymoon, though I suspect they'll be more discreet than the general public." Rias's face lit up. "Tell them to come by this evening. I've missed everyone." "Very well." Second, there have been numerous requests for interviews from various media outlets. I've been declining them all, but I wanted to confirm that's your preference. "Absolutely," Issei said immediately. "No interviews. Not yet, at least." "Wise," Venelana agreed. "Let's establish ourselves first before we start talking to journalists." Third, Grafia continued, "Lord Xiaticus has requested a private meeting with Lady Venelana this evening, if that's agreeable." Venelana nodded. "Tell him I'll meet him in his study after dinner." After Grafia departed, an awkward silence fell. The mention of Xiaticus had reminded all of them that their situation affected more than just the three of them. Venelana was still married to Xiaticus, still loved him, still had to maintain that relationship, while also building her new marriage with Issei. "How are you feeling about meeting with him?" Rias asked her mother gently. "Nervous," Venelana admitted. "We've corresponded during your honeymoon, but this will be our first face-to-face conversation since the wedding. We need to establish how our relationship will function going forward, how he and Issei will interact, how we'll all navigate this unprecedented situation. If you need me there," Issei began, but Venelana shook her head. "No, this is something Xiaticus and I need to work out between ourselves first. But I appreciate the offer." She smiled at him with genuine warmth. "You're a good man, Issei-kun. Xiaticus will see that in time." The rest of the afternoon was spent settling back into their suite and preparing for the evening's activities. Issei found himself thinking about the 3 months they'd spent in the honeymoon dimension, and how much had changed during that time. They'd started tentatively, almost like strangers despite the magical bond connecting them. Those first few weeks had been filled with careful conversations, awkward silences, and the constant awareness that they were all trying to figure out how to be married to each other. Slowly, gradually, things had shifted. They'd fallen into routines, morning meals together, individual time during the day, shared activities in the evening. They'd discovered common interests and learned to appreciate their differences. They'd had their first real argument about a month in, a disagreement about training methods that had escalated until all three of them were frustrated and angry. But they'd worked through it, learning how to communicate even when emotions ran high. And somewhere along the way, the relationship had become real. Not just a magical binding or a contractual obligation, but a genuine marriage in all the ways that mattered. Issei had grown to deeply respect Venelana, appreciating her wisdom, her strength, and her surprising sense of humor. His love for Rias had only deepened as he saw her navigate the complexities of sharing her husband with her mother. The physical aspect of their marriage had progressed naturally, without pressure or awkwardness. First tentative touches and hesitant kisses, then growing comfort and intimacy, and finally a genuine physical relationship that, while unconventional, worked for all three of them. Issei's face still heated when he thought about certain moments from the honeymoon, but there was no shame or regret, only a sense of rightness that continued to surprise him. "You've grown considerably, partner," Drake observed, sensing the direction of his thoughts. 3 months ago, you were a nervous mess. Now you're a confident husband to 2 remarkable women. That's no small achievement. I had good teachers. And good partners, indeed. Now let's see if you can maintain that confidence while dealing with the underworld's scrutiny." That evening, the Occult Research Club arrived en masse, flooding into the suite with enthusiastic greetings and barely contained curiosity. Aquino, Kaneko, Kiba, Gasper, and Asia all crowded around, along with Rosweiss, Zenobia, and Irina, who had joined the group during the honeymoon period. "Bucho!" Asia cried, throwing her arms around Rias. We missed you so much. How was the honeymoon? Are you happy? Is everything okay? One question at a time, Asia, Rias laughed, hugging the small blonde tightly. We miss you all too. And yes, everything is more than okay. The honeymoon it was good. Really good. You look different, Kaneko observed, studying all three of them with her characteristic bluntness. More settled. The bond between you is much stronger than before. We had 3 months to work on it, Issei said, ruffling Kaneko's hair despite her annoyed expression. Turns out time and privacy really help with building a relationship. So it's working? Kiba asked, his tone genuinely curious rather than judgmental. The marriage, I mean. You're all actually happy with the arrangement? The three of them exchanged glances, and something passed between them through the bond, a moment of perfect understanding and agreement. Yes, Venelana said simply. It's unconventional, and it's not without challenges, but it's working. We're making it work. That's wonderful! Irina exclaimed. I have to admit, I was worried. This situation is so unusual, and there was so much pressure on all of you. But if you're happy, that's what matters. They spent the next few hours catching up, with the ORC members filling them in on various events from the past month. There had been several minor incidents that the club had handled, some diplomatic meetings with other factions, and apparently a significant amount of gossip and speculation about the newlyweds that the club had been deflecting. People kept asking us for details, Aquino said with her characteristic smile, though there was a protective edge to it. We told them all to mind their own business, of course. Your marriage is your private affair, though the speculation has been wild, Zenobia added bluntly. Everything from predictions that you'd kill each other within a week to theories about how the physical aspects work. It's been invasive and inappropriate. We expected that, Rias said, though Issei could feel her irritation through the bond. People love to gossip about things they don't understand. We'll just have to prove them wrong by living our lives successfully. As the evening wore on and the conversation flowed easily, Issei felt himself relaxing. These were his friends, his family in all the ways that mattered. They accepted his unusual marriage without judgment, supported him without reservation, and made it clear they would stand with him against whatever scrutiny came. Eventually, the time came for Venelana to meet with Theodicus. She excused herself gracefully, and Issei felt a spike of nervousness through their bond. He wanted to go with her, to support her, but he knew this was something she needed to do alone. After she left, Rias pulled Issei aside to one of the private sitting rooms. How are you really feeling? She asked, studying his face. About being back, about all the attention, about everything? Honestly? I'm nervous, Issei admitted. The dimension was so peaceful, so private. Coming back to all of this, the scrutiny, the gossip, the pressure, it's overwhelming. I know. I feel the same way. Rias took his hands in hers. But we can handle this, Issei. The three of us together are stronger than any of us individually. We proved that during the honeymoon. Now we just need to prove it to the rest of the world. What if they never accept us? Issei asked quietly. What if no matter what we do, people always see our marriage as something wrong or unnatural? Rias considered this for a moment, then smiled. Then they're wrong, and their opinions don't matter. What matters is that we're happy, that our marriage works for us, and that we continue to grow together. Everyone else can think whatever they want. Issei pulled her close, holding her tightly. I love you, you know that? I know. And I love you too. Always have, always will. She pulled back slightly to look at him. Even now, when I have to share you with my mother, my love for you hasn't diminished. If anything, it's grown stronger watching you navigate this situation with such grace and courage. They stood like that for a long moment, drawing comfort from each other's presence. Through the bond, Issei could still feel Venelana's presence somewhere in the estate, her nervousness gradually giving way to relief as her conversation with Theodicus progressed. She's going to be okay, Rias murmured, sensing the direction of his thoughts through their connection. Father is a good man. He'll understand, even if it's difficult for him. How are you handling that aspect? Issei asked. Your father having to watch your mother with me? Rias sighed. It's complicated. Part of me feels guilty, like we're hurting him. But another part understands that this is bigger than any of our individual feelings. The contract had to be fulfilled, and we're all doing our best with an impossible situation. Including your father. Including him, Rias agreed. He's been incredibly gracious about all of this, more than I could have hoped. I think he genuinely wants Mother, and us, to be happy, even if the situation isn't what he would have chosen. Their conversation was interrupted by the return of Venelana, who entered the sitting room with visible relief on her face. How did it go? Rias asked immediately. Better than I dared hope, Venelana said, settling onto a couch with a grateful sigh. Xiaticus and I have come to an understanding. He accepts that my marriage to both of you is permanent and real, and that I will be dividing my time and attention accordingly. In return, I've assured him that my love for him hasn't disappeared, and that I want to maintain our relationship as well. So you're staying married to him too? Issei asked. Yes. Devil marriages don't end unless both parties agree, and neither of us wants that. It will be complicated. I'll essentially be maintaining two separate marriages simultaneously, but it's what we both want. How will that work practically? Rias asked. We'll figure it out as we go, Venelana said. But the important thing is that Xiaticus and I are still partners, still love each other, and still committed to making our relationship work alongside my new marriage to you both. He even said. She paused, a small smile playing at her lips. He even said that if anyone could make this impossible situation work, it would be us. Issei felt a wave of relief. He'd been worried about Xiaticus, about how the older devil would react to seeing his wife return from 3 months alone with another man. But it seemed the lord of the Gremory house was made of sterner stuff than Issei had given him credit for. Did he want to meet with me? Issei asked. I mean, we should probably talk at some point, right? He does, but not yet. He needs more time to process everything. Give him a few days, and then I'll arrange a meeting between you two. It will be awkward, but necessary. The three of them settled into comfortable silence, the stress of the day finally catching up with them. Through their bond, Issei could feel the complex swirl of emotions from both women: relief at being home, nervousness about the future, satisfaction with how they'd handled their first day back, and underneath it all, a steady certainty that they could face whatever came next as long as they faced it together. So, Rias said eventually, a mischievous glint in her eye, tomorrow we start training for the raiding game. Think you can handle getting back into combat shape, husband? Issei grinned. I'm the Sekyurai. I was born ready. Though I have to admit, 3 months without a real fight has left me a bit rusty. Then we'll have to fix that, Rias said. Nothing like a good raiding game to remind the underworld that we're still a force to be reckoned with, unusual marriage or not. As they retired to their shared bedroom, a space they'd grown comfortable occupying together over the 3 months in the dimension, Issei reflected on how much his life had changed. 6 months ago, he'd been a young devil trying to prove himself worthy of Rias's love. Now he was married to both her and her mother, bound for eternity in a relationship that defied convention but somehow worked. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. They would face scrutiny, judgment, and challenges from all sides. But as he settled into bed with Rias on one side and Venelana on the other, feeling their presence through the bond that connected all three of them, Issei felt ready to face whatever came. They were family now, in the most literal and magical sense. And family, no matter how unconventional, was worth fighting for. Sleep well, partner, Drake rumbled contentedly. Tomorrow begins a new chapter. But you've proven you can handle anything life throws at you. Even a marriage to a mother and daughter. That's one way to look at it, Issei thought drowsily as sleep claimed him. Though I prefer to think of it as having twice the support and love to face the world with. Well said. Well said indeed. 3 months after their return from the honeymoon dimension, life had settled into something approaching normalcy. Or at least as normal as life could be when you were married to both the Devil Princess and her mother. Issei had won his first raiding game back with a spectacular display of power that had silenced many critics. The Occult Research Club had handled several diplomatic incidents with the usual efficiency, and the constant media scrutiny had died down from a roar to a manageable buzz. But this morning was different. Issei woke to an empty bed, which was unusual. Over the past months, they'd fallen into comfortable sleeping arrangements, sometimes all three together, sometimes in pairs, occasionally alone when someone needed space. But both Rias and Venelana were usually there when he woke up. Through the bond, he could sense both of them in the bathroom attached to their master suite, and there was something odd about their emotional signatures. A mixture of shock, excitement, and disbelief that made his heart race. Something significant has happened, partner, Drake observed. I suggest you investigate immediately. Issei practically leaped out of bed, pulling on her robe as he hurried to the bathroom door. He knocked gently. Rias? Venelana? Is everything okay? There was a moment of silence, then the door opened to reveal both women standing there with identical expressions of stunned amazement. Rias was holding what looked like some kind of magical crystal that glowed with a soft pink light, while Venelana held a similar crystal that pulsed with the same gentle radiance. Issei, Rias said, her voice trembling slightly. We need to talk. What's wrong? Are you hurt? Sick? Issei's mind raced through possibilities, none of them good. Not wrong, Venelana said, and despite her composed exterior, Issei could see her hands shaking. And not sick. Quite the opposite, actually. Then what? Issei stopped as understanding suddenly crashed over him like a tidal wave. The crystals, the shared shock, the emotional turbulence he was sensing through the bond. Oh. Oh no. Please don't tell me. We're pregnant, Rias said, the words coming out in a rush. Both of us. At the same time. For a moment, Issei's brain simply refused to process the information. Pregnant. Both of them. His wives were pregnant with his children. He was going to be a father. Twice over. Simultaneously, the world tilted sideways, and suddenly he was sitting on the floor without quite remembering how he got there. Issei. Rias dropped beside him, concern flooding through their bond. Are you okay? Say something. Pregnant, Issei managed to croak out. Both of you. How is that even possible? I mean, I know how it's possible, but you said devil fertility was controlled, that you could prevent conception through magic. We can, Venelana said, settling gracefully on his other side despite her own obvious shock. Which is what makes this so surprising. Both Rias and I have been maintaining standard contraceptive spells. The chances of even one pregnancy breaking through those wards is minimal. For both of us to conceive simultaneously despite active prevention. She trailed off, shaking her head in amazement. The bond, Rias said suddenly, her eyes widening. It has to be the bond. The triple binding we performed at the wedding, it connected us at a level deeper than normal devil magic. Maybe it overrode our contraceptive spells without us realizing it. That would explain the timing, Venelana agreed, her analytical mind already working through the implications. We both conceived within days of each other, probably during the last few weeks of the honeymoon when our bond was at its strongest. The magic recognized us as a unified family unit and encouraged reproduction. Encouraged? Issei repeated weakly. It got you both pregnant without permission? Ancient magic often works in unexpected ways, Venelana said. The contract of crimson binding was designed to merge families permanently. What better way to ensure that than through children? The magic may have literally taken matters into its own hands. Issei's head was spinning. He tried to focus on the practical implications. Are the babies healthy? Is everything okay medically? Both women smiled at his immediate concern, and warmth flowed through the bond. We use diagnostic crystals, Rias explained, holding up the glowing object. They're standard for detecting devil pregnancies. Both of us are showing positive results, and the preliminary scans suggest everything is developing normally. We'll need to see a proper healer for confirmation and detailed examination, Venelana added. But yes, as far as we can tell right now, everything is healthy. How far along are you? About 6 weeks, give or take, Rias said. We should have noticed the symptoms earlier, but they were subtle, and we've been so busy adjusting to life back in the underworld that we didn't pay attention to the signs. 6 weeks. Issei did the math quickly. That meant conception had occurred right near the end of their time in the honeymoon dimension, during those final weeks when their relationship had solidified into something truly intimate and comfortable. I'm going to be a father, Issei said slowly, the reality finally starting to sink in. We're going to have babies. 2 babies. At the same time. Technically more than 2, Venelana said with a slight smile. Devil pregnancies often result in multiples, especially when powerful bloodlines are involved. We won't know exact numbers until a healer performs a detailed examination, but we should prepare for the possibility of twins or even triplets. Issei's vision swam again. Twins. Triplets. Multiple children from each wife, all being born around the same time. His family was about to explode in size in a way he never imagined. "Congratulations, partner," Drake said, and there was genuine warmth in the dragon's voice. "You're going to be a father. The Red Dragon Emperor will have heirs. This is momentous news. How are you two feeling?" Issei asked, focusing on his wives rather than his own spinning thoughts. "I mean emotionally. Are you happy about this? Scared?" Both, Rias admitted immediately. "I'm thrilled. I've always wanted children, and having them with you is a dream come true. But I'm also terrified. I'm young for a devil mother, I'm still actively engaged in raiding games and political duties, and the timing is complicated." "I'm feeling much the same," Venelana said. "Though in my case, the complications are different. My youngest child is centuries old. I thought my days of pregnancy and infant care were long behind me. The idea of starting over, of raising children alongside my daughter who is also raising children with the same father." She shook her head. "It's overwhelming, but we're in this together," Rias said firmly, taking both Issei's hand and her mother's. "All three of us, plus these babies. We'll figure it out the same way we've figured out everything else, as a family." They sat together on the bathroom floor for a long moment, the magnitude of the situation settling over them. Finally Issei spoke. "We should probably tell people. Your family, the ORC, probably Surzex, since this is going to be political news as much as personal news." "Agreed," Venelana said. "Though we should see a healer first, get official confirmation and details. I'll contact Lady Aesculapius. She's the finest medical practitioner in the underworld and completely discreet. We can trust her. And then we tell Surzex and Father," Rias added. "This is going to cause quite a stir in Devil's society. The heirs to the Gremory line, conceived in such an unusual marriage. Let them stir," Issei said with growing conviction. "We've proven we can handle scrutiny. This is just another challenge, and we'll face it the same way we've faced everything else, together." The warmth that flowed through their bond in response to his words was almost overwhelming. Despite the shock and fear, there was also joy, genuine, powerful joy at the new life growing within both women, at the family they were building together. Lady Aesculapius arrived within the hour, a distinguished devil woman who appeared to be in her middle years but whose eyes held the wisdom of millennia. She was all business as she performed her examination, using advanced magical diagnostics that made the simple crystals look like children's toys. Issei paced nervously in the living area while the examination took place in the bedroom. He could feel his wife's nervousness through the bond, could sense the healer's focused concentration as she worked. Every minute felt like an hour. Finally, the bedroom door opened, and Lady Aesculapius emerged with a professional smile. "Congratulations," she said formally. "Both Lady Rias and Lady Venelana are indeed pregnant, approximately 6 weeks along, as they estimated. The pregnancies appear healthy and are progressing normally." "And the number?" Venelana asked, stepping out behind the healer. "How many children are we carrying?" Lady Aesculapius consulted her notes. "Lady Rias is carrying twins, 2 strong heartbeats, both developing well. Lady Venelana is carrying a single child, but the magical signature is extraordinarily powerful, suggesting a very strong bloodline inheritance. Twins and a single. 3 children total, all conceived simultaneously, all growing within his wives." Issei felt his knees go weak again, but this time he managed to stay standing. 3, he breathed. "We're having 3 babies, indeed. And I must say, this is highly unusual even by devil standards. For 2 women to conceive simultaneously by the same father, despite active contraceptive magic, suggests an extraordinarily powerful magical connection between all parties." The healer studied them with interest. "The triple binding, I presume? I've heard rumors about your wedding ceremony." "Yes," Venelana confirmed. "We believe the bond may have overridden our contraceptive spells." "Fascinating. I'd like to monitor these pregnancies closely, if you're willing. The magical implications alone are worth studying, and I want to ensure everything proceeds smoothly given the unique circumstances." They agreed, and Lady Aesculapius provided them with detailed instructions for prenatal care, dietary recommendations, and magical exercises that would help the developing children. She also emphasized the importance of emotional stability and the strength of their familial bond, noting that devil pregnancies were heavily influenced by the parents' emotional and magical states. After the healer departed with promises of weekly checkups, the three of them sat together in stunned silence for a long moment. "3 children," Rias said finally, one hand unconsciously moving to her still flat stomach. "I'm going to be a mother to twins, and I'm going to be a mother again after centuries," Venelana added, mirroring her daughter's gesture. "This is going to change everything. We should tell people," Issei said. "Starting with Sirzex. He's going to need to know, both as your brother and as a Mao." Sirzex's reaction when they told him an hour later was priceless. The most powerful devil in the underworld, one of the 4 Maos who ruled their entire society, actually stumbled backward and sat down hard in his chair. "Both of you?" he managed after a long moment. "At the same time? The triple binding apparently had side effects we didn't anticipate," Venelana explained. "Our bond is strong enough that it overrode contraceptive magic and synchronized our fertility." "I'm going to be an uncle," Sirzex said slowly. "And also a brother to children who will be my sister's children. And my mother's children. With the same father." He pressed his hands to his temples. "The family tree is going to be impossible to explain." "We know," Rias said sympathetically. "But this is our reality now. We're having children, and we need to start preparing for the political and social implications." Sirzex recovered his composure quickly, his expression shifting into the focused determination of a ruler dealing with a complicated situation. "You're right. This will be major news throughout the underworld. The heirs to the Gremry line, born from such an unusual union. There will be implications for inheritance laws, succession protocols, the whole structure of devil nobility." "What do you mean?" Issei asked, worry creeping into his voice. "Traditionally, the firstborn child of a noble house inherits the title and territories," Sirzex explained. "But in your case, you'll have 3 children born essentially simultaneously, twins from Rias and a single from mother. Determining which child is the heir will be complicated." "Can't they all be heirs?" Issei suggested. "Share the inheritance equally? That's actually not a bad solution," Sirzex said thoughtfully. "Unprecedented, but given the unprecedented nature of your marriage, it might work. I'll need to consult with the other Maos and various legal scholars, but we can probably establish your children as co-heirs to the Gremry line. And then there's the matter of names," Venelana added. "Will the children bear the Gremry name? Or will they bear Issei's surname as well? He's technically a Hyade who became a Gremry through reincarnation." "Let's worry about that later," Rias said, waving a hand. "Right now, I'm more concerned with the immediate future. I'm pregnant with twins while still active as a rating game competitor and political figure. How do I handle that?" "Carefully," Sirzex said. "Devil pregnancies are more resilient than human ones, but you'll still need to be cautious, especially as you progress further along. You can probably continue light duties for the first few months, but eventually you'll need to step back from combat and strenuous activities." "I have a rating game scheduled in 2 weeks," Rias said with concern. "You'll need to cancel it," Lady Aesculapius said firmly. She'd accompanied them to the meeting at Sirzex's request. "Or at least postpone it. Fighting in a rating game while pregnant is inadvisable, especially with twins." Rias looked disappointed but nodded. "I understand. The babies come first." "And mother," Sirzex said, turning to Venelana with brotherly concern. "How are you handling this? I know you weren't expecting to be pregnant again after so long." "I'm adjusting," Venelana said with a slight smile. "It's strange, certainly, but not unwelcome. I've always loved being a mother, and the thought of having another child, especially one from this unique situation, is actually rather exciting once the shock wears off." They spent the next hour discussing practical matters, prenatal care, public announcements, security concerns, and the myriad other complications that came with 2 simultaneous pregnancies in a high-profile noble family. By the time they finished, Issei's head was spinning with information and plans. "There's one more thing we need to discuss," Sirzex said as they prepared to leave. "Father. Does he know yet?" Not yet, Venelana said quietly. I wanted to tell him privately. This will be complicated for him. He's about to become both a grandfather and a father to children from the same generation, Surzek said sympathetically. Yes, I'd say that qualifies as complicated. But he'll handle it. Father always does. That evening, Venelana met with Ziaticus in his private study while Issei and Rias waited anxiously in their suite. Through the bond, Issei could feel Venelana's nervousness and Ziaticus's shock as she delivered the news. How do you think he's taking it? Rias asked, sensing the same emotional currents. About as well as can be expected, Issei replied. He's shocked, obviously, but I don't sense anger. More like resigned acceptance mixed with some genuine happiness. When Venelana returned an hour later, she confirmed Issei's assessment. He took it better than I feared. He's happy for us, even though the situation is strange for him. He said. She paused, smiling slightly. He said that at least now he'll get to be a grandfather at a reasonable age, since he's been waiting for Surzek and Grafia to have more children for decades. That's very gracious of him, Rias said. I'm glad he's accepting this. He wants to meet with you tomorrow, Issei, Venelana added. Both as the father of your children and as, well, I suppose as his stepson-in-law? The terminology gets confusing. But he wants to talk. Issei's stomach dropped. He'd been putting off serious one-on-one conversations with Ziaticus, finding various excuses to avoid the awkwardness. But with babies on the way, they couldn't avoid it any longer. I'll meet with him, Issei said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. It's time we had a real conversation anyway. That night, as they lay in bed together, Issei in the middle, with Rias on one side and Venelana on the other, he reflected on the enormous change that had just occurred in their lives. Are you scared? Rias asked softly, her head on his shoulder. Terrified, Issei admitted. I'm barely 20 years old. I still feel like a kid myself sometimes. How am I supposed to be a father to 3 children? The same way you became a husband to both of us, Venelana said from his other side, her hand resting on his chest. One day at a time, with courage and love and the willingness to make mistakes and learn from them. You're going to be an amazing father, Rias added. I've seen how you are with Kaneko and Gasper, how protective and caring you are with those you love. You'll figure it out. We all will, Venelana said. Together. That's the advantage of our situation. 3 parents instead of 2. 3 people to share the joys and the burdens, 3 perspectives to draw on, 3 sets of hands to handle 3 babies. Issei laughed despite his nervousness. When you put it that way, it almost sounds manageable. Almost, Rias agreed with a giggle. Ask us again when we're dealing with 3 screaming infants at 3 in the morning. They lay together in comfortable silence for a while, and Issei became aware of the subtle changes in his wives' bodies and magical signatures. The pregnancies were still early, nothing visible yet, but he could sense the new life growing within them through their bond. 2 tiny presences inside Rias, flickering with potential power. One stronger presence in Venelana, already showing signs of the formidable magical inheritance it would carry. His children. His family. In 6 or 7 months, they would be here, and his life would change in ways he couldn't even imagine yet. You're going to be fine, partner, Drake rumbled gently. I've watched countless wielders of the boosted gear over the millennia. Many of them had children. Some were good fathers, some were terrible. But you have advantages they didn't, a strong support system, genuine love, and the determination to do right by your family. That's more than most can claim. Thanks, Drake. That actually helps. Besides, I'm looking forward to meeting these children. The offspring of the Securii and 2 powerful devil bloodlines? They're going to be extraordinary. What are you thinking about? Rias asked, sensing his contemplative mood through the bond. Just that our kids are going to be something special, Issei said. Between your Gremory powers, Venelana's Bale heritage, and my boosted gear, they're going to have some serious magical potential. Assuming they inherit any of it, Venelana cautioned. Devil genetics can be unpredictable. Some children inherit tremendous power, others inherit almost none. There's no guarantee. I don't care if they're powerful or not, Issei said firmly. I just want them to be healthy and happy. Everything else is secondary. The warmth that flowed through the bond in response to his words was almost overwhelming. Both women shifted closer, and Issei found himself wrapped in their embrace, 3 people, soon to be 6, connected by bonds of magic and love and growing family. We should probably start thinking about names, Rias said eventually. If I'm having twins, that's 2 names to choose. And mother will need one as well. Do we want to know the genders before they're born? Venelana asked. Or wait for a surprise? Can we even find out with devil magic? Issei asked. Yes, but not for another month or so, Venelana explained. The pregnancies need to develop further before gender can be reliably determined magically. Let's wait and find out together, Rias suggested. We can start thinking about names for both boys and girls, and then decide once we know what we're having. They spent the next hour discussing potential names, debating the merits of traditional devil names versus more modern options, laughing at some of the more outrageous suggestions, and generally enjoying the excitement of planning for their future family. By the time they finally drifted off to sleep, Issei felt a strange mixture of terror and joy. His life had taken yet another impossible turn, but as always, he had his family beside him to face whatever came next. 3 children. 3 babies who would be born into one of the most unusual family situations in devil history. 3 new lives that would forever change the dynamics of their already complicated marriage. It was terrifying. It was overwhelming. It was absolutely perfect, and Issei Hayata wouldn't have it any other way. The Gremery Estate's private medical wing had been transformed into what looked like a command center. Lady Esculapius had taken over an entire suite of rooms, filling them with advanced magical diagnostic equipment, carefully calibrated monitoring crystals, and enough medical supplies to handle any conceivable complication. Today marked the 7th month of the pregnancies, and everyone was on high alert. Issei paced nervously in the waiting area, his footsteps wearing a path in the expensive carpet. Through the bond, he could feel both Rias and Venelana in the delivery chambers beyond, Rias's pain and determination mixing with Venelana's calmer but no less intense focus. Both women were in active labor, their bodies working to bring new life into the world. Sit down before you wear a hole in the floor, Sirzex said from where he sat with forced calm, though his hands gripped the armrests of his chair tightly enough to leave marks. Lady Esculapius is the best. Everything will be fine. Easy for you to say, Issei muttered, but he sat down anyway, his leg immediately beginning to bounce with nervous energy. You're not the one whose wives are both in labor simultaneously. No, but I am the one whose sister and mother are both giving birth, Sirzex pointed out. Trust me, this is strange for all of us. The waiting room was crowded with family and friends. Xiaotica sat apart from the others, his expression complex, joy at becoming both a grandfather and a father warring with the strangeness of the situation. Grafia stood behind Sirzex, one hand on her husband's shoulder in silent support. Milikas, now old enough to understand what was happening, sat quietly with a book he wasn't really reading. The entire occult research club had arrived as well, despite Issei's protests that they didn't need to wait. Aquino, Kaneko, Kiba, Asia, Gasper, Zenobia, Irina, and Rosweiss all occupied various seats, offering support through their presence even if they couldn't do anything to help with the actual births. Try to remain calm, partner, Drake advised, though even the ancient dragons sounded somewhat tense. Your anxiety is transmitting through the bond to your wives. They need you to be strong right now. Issei took a deep breath, forcing himself to project calmness through the bond even though his insides were churning. Almost immediately, he felt Rias's gratitude and Venelana's acknowledgement. They could feel his support even from separate rooms. The past 7 months had been a whirlwind of changes and challenges. The public announcement of the dual pregnancies had caused exactly the sensation Sirzex had predicted, with every news outlet in the underworld running stories about the Crimson Heirs and speculating endlessly about what their births would mean for Devil's society. Rias had been forced to withdraw from active raiding games after the 3rd month, much to her frustration. Her normally slender frame had expanded with the twins she carried, and while devil pregnancies were more magical than physical, the drain on her energy had been considerable. She'd spent the last few months managing her peerage's training from the sidelines while dealing with constant medical checkups and the various discomforts of pregnancy. Venelana had handled her pregnancy with the grace and composure she brought to everything, though Issei knew through their bond that she found the experience more challenging than she let on. After centuries of not being pregnant, her body had needed to remember how, and the child she carried was already showing signs of tremendous magical power that sometimes manifested in unexpected ways, causing objects to levitate or lights to flicker when the baby kicked. The pregnancies had changed their relationship dynamics too. Issei had found himself becoming fiercely protective of both women, sometimes to the point of being overprotective, a tendency they tolerated with amused patience. The physical intimacy of their marriage had shifted to accommodate the pregnancies, becoming gentler and more focused on comfort and connection than passion. And now, finally, after 7 months of anticipation and preparation, the babies were coming. A door opened and Lady Esculapius emerged, her professional mask firmly in place. Everyone in the waiting room immediately stood, tension crackling in the air. Lady Rias has delivered her first child, the healer announced. A healthy baby girl, strong magical signature, already showing signs of power of destruction inheritance. Mother and daughter are both doing well. A collective sigh of relief swept through the room, followed by excited murmurs. Issei felt tears stinging his eyes. A daughter. He had a daughter. Can I see them? He asked urgently. Not yet. Lady Rias is still in labor with the second twin. But soon. Lady Esculapius studied him with professional concern. How are you holding up? Your emotional state is being transmitted to both mothers through your bond. I'm fine, Issei lied. Just worried. Understandable. But try to stay calm. We're monitoring both deliveries closely, and everything is proceeding normally. She turned to go back, then paused. It shouldn't be too much longer now. Both women are progressing well. The healer disappeared back into the delivery chambers, leaving Issei to sink back into his chair with shaking legs. A girl, Asia said softly, tears of joy streaming down her face. You have a daughter, Issei-san. Congratulations. 1 down, 2 to go, Akino added with her characteristic smile, though her eyes were warm. You're doing wonderfully, Issei-kun. Through the bond, Issei could feel Rias's exhaustion and relief mixed with renewed determination as her body prepared to deliver the second twin. He could feel Venelana's labor intensifying as well, her contractions growing stronger and more frequent. Both women were working so hard, enduring so much pain to bring their children into the world. I love you both, he projected through the bond as strongly as he could. You're amazing. So strong. I'm so proud of you. The warmth that flooded back through the connection made his throat tight with emotion. Another 30 minutes passed in tense silence before Lady Esculapius emerged again, this time with a genuine smile. Lady Rias has delivered her second child, another healthy girl. Twins, as predicted, both strong and already showing remarkable magical potential. Lady Rias is exhausted but recovering well. 2 girls, Issei breathed. I have 2 daughters. Congratulations, brother, Surzek said, standing to clasp Issei's shoulder. You're a father twice over now. How does it feel? Terrifying, Issei admitted. And amazing. Can I see them now? Give the medical staff a few more minutes to complete their assessments, and help Lady Rias settle. But yes, soon you'll be able to meet your daughters. What about mother? Surzek asked with concern. Lady Venelana's labor is progressing well, but she's not quite ready to deliver yet. Perhaps another hour or 2. The child she's carrying is large and powerful. It's taking more effort. Lady Esculapius paused. I should return to monitor her. Issei-sama, someone will come get you when you can see your family. As the healer departed once more, Xiaticus approached Issei. The older devil's expression was complicated but not unkind. Congratulations, he said simply. You have 2 daughters. That's wonderful news. Thank you, Issei said, not quite sure how to navigate this conversation. I know this must be strange for you. It is, Xiaticus interrupted. But that doesn't make it less joyful. New life is always worth celebrating, no matter the circumstances. And these children, your children with my daughter and wife, their family. My family? I may not have fathered them, but I will love them as grandchildren and as... He paused, clearly struggling with terminology. As siblings to my other children, I suppose? Before Issei could respond, a young medical assistant appeared at the door. Issei-sama? You can come meet your daughters now. Issei's heart leaped into his throat. His legs felt like jelly as he stood, and he was grateful when Sirzek steadied him with a hand on his arm. Go, the mouse said with a warm smile. Meet your family. The walk to Rias's recovery chamber felt both too long and too short. Issei's mind was racing. What would his daughters look like? Would they be healthy? Would Rias be okay? Would he be able to handle this massive responsibility? The door opened, and all his worries evaporated. Rias lay in a large, comfortable bed, looking exhausted but radiantly happy. Her crimson hair was damp with sweat, her face was pale from exertion, but her smile when she saw Issei was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. And in her arms, wrapped in soft blankets, were 2 tiny bundles. Issei, Rias said softly. Come meet your daughters. Issei approached slowly, almost reverently, his eyes fixed on the 2 small forms. As he drew closer, he could see tiny faces, impossibly perfect, both sleeping peacefully after their dramatic entrance into the world. This one, Rias said, indicating the baby in her right arm, came first. She's already tried to use her power of destruction twice. Lady Aesculapius had to put up magical shields. She's going to be a handful. The baby had a light dusting of crimson hair already visible on her head, and even in sleep, Issei could see Rias's features in her tiny face. And this one, Rias continued, shifting slightly to show the second twin, is quieter but no less powerful. She hasn't manifested any abilities yet, but I can feel her magical signature. She's going to be incredibly strong. This baby had darker hair, almost brown with hints of red, and her features seemed to combine Rias's and Issei's in a different ratio than her sister. Can I? Issei's voice cracked. Can I hold them? Of course, Rias said, her eyes shining with unshed tears. You're their father. Come, sit beside me. Issei settled onto the bed carefully, terrified of doing something wrong. Rias transferred one of the twins into his arms, and suddenly he was holding his daughter, actually holding her, feeling her tiny weight, seeing her perfect little face, sensing her magical signature intertwining with his own through the bond. She's so small, Issei whispered in awe. All babies are small, Rias said with a tired laugh. But they grow quickly, especially devil babies with powerful bloodlines. By this time next year, she'll probably be walking and starting to talk. What should we name them? Issei asked, unable to take his eyes off the tiny face. I've been thinking about that for months, Rias said. What about Akari for this one? She indicated the baby with the darker hair that Issei was holding. It means light or brightness. And Kurenai for her sister, crimson, of course, given her hair and her early mastery of our family's power of destruction. Akari and Kurenai, Issei repeated, testing the names. I love them. They're perfect. They sat together for a long moment, parents holding their children, the reality of their new family settling over them like a warm blanket. Through the bond, Issei could feel Rias's exhaustion, her joy, her love for him and their daughters, and her concern for her mother who was still in labor. How is mother doing? Rias asked, confirming his sense of her thoughts. Still in labor, but progressing well according to Lady Aesculapius. It should be another hour or 2. Go to her when she's ready, Rias said softly. She shouldn't be alone when she delivers. I have the twins and the medical staff. Mother needs her husband with her. The fact that Rias could think of Venelana's needs even while exhausted from her own delivery made Issei's heart swell with love. Are you sure? I don't want to leave you, I'm sure. We're family, Issei. All of us. Mother is giving birth to your child, our family's child. You should be there. She smiled. Besides, I'm not going anywhere. These 2 will keep me plenty busy for the moment. Another hour passed before Lady Aesculapius came to find Issei, who had returned to the waiting room to share news of his daughters with everyone. The healer's expression was serious but not concerned. Lady Venelana is ready to deliver. She's asking for you, Issei-sama. Would you like to be present for the birth? Issei's stomach dropped. Present? Like, in the delivery chamber? If you're comfortable with it. Many devil fathers choose to be present to provide magical and emotional support during delivery. Given your bond with Lady Venelana, your presence could help ease the process. Go, Sirzek urged. Mother needs you. Issei followed Lady Aesculapius through the corridors to Venelana's delivery chamber, his heart pounding. He'd been there for the aftermath of Rias's delivery, but actually being present during the birth was different, more intimate, more intense. The chamber was similar to Rias's but arranged differently, with more space and more monitoring equipment. Venelana lay on the bed, her silver hair damp, her face showing strain but maintaining her characteristic composure even in the midst of intense labor. "Issei-kun," she said, relief evident in her voice. "Thank you for coming." "Of course," Issei said, moving to her side and taking her hand. "I'm here. Whatever you need." "Just your presence," Venelana said, squeezing his hand as another contraction hit. "The bond helps. Your strength flows through it, gives me something to draw on." Lady Aesculapius positioned herself at the foot of the bed, surrounded by floating diagnostic crystals and magical monitors. "We're very close now, Lady Venelana. On the next contraction, I need you to push." What followed was the most intense experience of Issei's life. He held Venelana's hand, letting her squeeze until his bones creaked, projecting strength and encouragement through their bond while trying not to get in the way of the medical staff. Venelana worked with focused determination, her centuries of experience and iron will evident in how she handled the pain and exertion. "The head is crowning," Lady Aesculapius announced. "One more push, Lady Venelana. You're almost there." With a final supreme effort, Venelana pushed, and suddenly the chamber filled with the sound Issei had been waiting for. A baby's cry, strong and healthy and unmistakably powerful. "It's a boy," Lady Aesculapius announced, holding up a squirming infant who was already glowing with magical energy. "And he's magnificent. I've never seen such a strong magical signature in a newborn." The healer quickly cleaned and checked the baby before wrapping him in a soft blanket and placing him in Venelana's arms. Issei stared in awe at his son, a tiny boy with silver hair like his mother's and eyes that, even newly opened, seemed to hold unusual depth. "Hello, little one," Venelana whispered, exhaustion and joy mixing in her voice. "Welcome to the world." "He's beautiful," Issei said, his voice choked with emotion. Is everything okay?" "Healthy?" "Perfectly healthy," Lady Aesculapius confirmed. "And his magical power is extraordinary. He's inherited very strongly from both parents. I can sense elements of the Bale bloodline, the Gremry power, and something else that must be your boosted gear influence. This child is going to be remarkable." Venelana smiled at Issei, and through their bond, he felt her love, her pride, her satisfaction at having successfully brought their son into the world. "Would you like to hold him?" With trembling hands, Issei took his son, cradling the small boy carefully. The baby stared up at him with eyes that seemed far too aware for a newborn, and Issei felt a connection snap into place, father to son, a bond that transcended magic or blood. "A son," Drake rumbled with satisfaction. "A male heir to carry on your legacy. He already has tremendous power, partner. I can sense it even from within the boosted gear. This child will be extraordinary. What should we name him?" Issei asked, looking between his son and Venelana. "I was thinking about that during labor," Venelana said thoughtfully. "What about Isamu?" "It means courage or bravery. Given his father's heroic nature and the powerful bloodlines he carries, it seems fitting." "Isamu," Issei repeated, looking down at his son. "I love it. Isamu Gremry." "Isamu Hayata Gremry," Venelana corrected gently. "He should carry both family names, I think. As should the twins. They're as much yours as they are ours." Over the next hour, as Venelana recovered from the delivery and medical staff completed their assessments of baby Isamu, Issei split his time between his wives and their children. He brought Akari and Kurinai to meet their mother Venelana and their baby uncle/brother Isamu. The family relationships were already impossibly tangled, but no one seemed to care. The sight of Venelana holding her newborn son while Rias held her twin daughters, all three women exhausted but radiant, all three babies sleeping peacefully, made Issei's chest tight with emotion. This was his family. These 5 people, his 2 wives and 3 children, were the most important things in his world. "We should let the others in," Rias said eventually. "Everyone's been waiting for hours. They deserve to meet the babies." The waiting room erupted in celebration when Issei emerged to announce that all 3 babies had been born healthy. Sirzex immediately moved to visit his sister and mother, while the rest of the group took turns visiting in small groups to avoid overwhelming the new mothers. Asia cried tears of joy when she held baby Akari, her gentle nature immediately evident in how carefully she supported the tiny girl. Kaneko was surprisingly tender with little Kurenai, her usual stoic expression softening as she looked down at the sleeping infant. Akino held baby Isamu with the confidence of someone who had probably helped with many births over her long life, cooing softly and making the baby boy grip her finger with surprising strength. Xiaticus's visit was perhaps the most emotionally complex. He approached Venelana's chamber slowly, clearly steeling himself for the complicated feelings of seeing his wife with another man's child. But when Venelana offered him Isamu to hold, something in the older devil's expression cracked. "He's beautiful," Xiaticus said quietly, looking down at the silver-haired boy. "He has your eyes, Venelana. An incredible power. I can feel it even without active sensing." "He'll need guidance," Venelana said softly. "As will the twins. They're all going to be extraordinarily powerful, and power without wisdom is dangerous. I hope you'll be willing to be part of their lives, Xiaticus. As a grandfather, as a family member. They should know you." "Of course," Xiaticus said immediately. "Their family. That's all that matters." He looked at Issei, who had been standing awkwardly to the side. "You and I should talk soon, Hayato, about the children, about the future, about how we're all going to navigate this unusual situation. But for now, congratulations. You're a father. 3 times over. That's quite an achievement." "Thank you," Issei said sincerely. "And thank you for being understanding about all of this. I know it can't be easy." "Nothing worth doing ever is," Xiaticus replied with a slight smile. "But we'll figure it out. We always do." As night fell over the Gremery estate, the excitement gradually settled. The medical staff had moved both mothers and their babies to a large recovery suite where they could all be together, and most of the visitors had departed to let the new family rest. Issei sat in a comfortable chair between the 2 beds, watching his wives sleep while his 3 children dozed in their magical cribs nearby. Through the bond, he could feel all 5 of them, Rias's exhausted contentment, Venelana's deeper satisfaction, and the 3 tiny new presences that were his children, their magical signatures bright and pure and full of potential. "This is a good day, partner," Drake said softly. "One of the best. Treasure this moment, it's the beginning of everything." "I will," Issei thought, his eyes moving from one sleeping face to another. "I promise." He thought about everything that had led to this moment, the impossible contract, the controversial wedding, the challenging honeymoon, the shocking pregnancies. Every step had seemed insurmountable at the time, but here they were, a family, whole and healthy and stronger than ever. Akari stirred in her crib, making a small noise that immediately brought Kurenai into fussiness as well. Issei stood quickly, moving to comfort them before they could fully wake and disturb their exhausted mothers. He picked up Akari with one arm and Kurenai with the other, marveling at how natural it already felt to hold his daughters. "Sure," he whispered. "It's okay. Papa's here. You're safe." Both girls settled almost immediately, responding to his voice and his magical signature. Issei walked slowly around the room, gently bouncing them, humming softly under his breath. He could feel Rias and Venelana's awareness through the bond. Both women had woken slightly but were content to let him handle this first midnight fussing. As he walked and hummed, baby Isamu began to stir as well. Issei managed to pick up his son's crib with a small burst of devil magic, bringing it closer so he could keep all 3 children within reach. "This is your life now," Issei murmured to himself. 3 babies. 2 wives. 1 impossibly complicated family. And you know what? I wouldn't change a thing. Spoken like a true father, Drake said with approval. "Sleep while you can, partner. Something tells me you're not going to get much of it in the coming months." "Probably not," Issei agreed, looking down at his 3 children with a mixture of terror and overwhelming love. "But it's going to be worth every sleepless night." As dawn began to break over the underworld, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold, Issei Hayato stood watch over his family, his wives recovering from the incredible feat of bringing new life into the world, his 3 children sleeping peacefully in his arms and nearby. The Red Dragon Emperor, who had defeated gods and monsters, who had survived impossible battles and world-threatening crises, had just accomplished his greatest feat yet, becoming a father. And this, he knew, was only the beginning. 5 years had passed since the birth of the children, and the Gremery estate had transformed from a dignified noble household into something far more chaotic and infinitely more alive. Issei stood in the main courtyard, watching with a mixture of pride and concern as his 3 children demonstrated their rapidly developing powers to a group of visiting dignitaries. Akari and Kurenai, now 5 years old, moved with the confidence of children who had never known a day without magic in their lives. Akari, with her dark crimson hair and sharp brown eyes that she'd inherited from Issei, was currently levitating 3 large stones simultaneously while explaining the theory behind precision magical control to an impressed audience. She had inherited Rias's intellect and Issei's determination, creating a combination that was both brilliant and occasionally exhausting. Kurenai, her twin sister, stood a few feet away with her bright crimson hair cascading down her back, the spitting image of young Rias. She held up one hand, and crimson energy crackled around it, the unmistakable power of destruction that was the Gremery family's signature ability. She'd manifested it at age 2, far earlier than was typical, and had spent the last 3 years learning to control it under Rias and Serzex's careful tutelage. "Watch this," Kurenai called out, her voice carrying the enthusiasm of a child showing off. She directed the power of destruction at a large boulder that had been placed specifically for this demonstration. The crimson energy struck true, and the boulder simply ceased to exist, not exploding, not fragmenting, just gone, erased from reality. The dignitaries applauded politely, though Issei could sense some of them were nervous. His daughters were powerful, far more powerful than most devil children their age, and power always made people nervous. But it was Isamu who truly captured everyone's attention. Issei's son stood slightly apart from his sisters, his silver hair gleaming in the afternoon light. At 5 years old, he was already showing signs of the incredible magical potential that Lady Aesculapius had sensed at his birth. His violet eyes, Venelana's eyes, studied the gathering with an intensity unusual for his age. "Isamu," Venelana called gently from where she stood with Rias and several noble ladies. "Would you like to show our guests what you've been practicing?" The boy nodded solemnly and stepped forward. Unlike his more exuberant sisters, Isamu's demeanor was calm, controlled, almost eerily mature for a 5-year-old. He raised one hand, and suddenly the air around him began to shimmer. What happened next made several of the dignitaries gasp. Magical energy erupted from Isamu in waves, not the crimson of the Gremery power of destruction, but something else entirely. Golden light mixed with silver, swirling around him in complex patterns that suggested the influence of multiple powerful bloodlines. The Bale clan's incredible raw power, the Gremery magical aptitude, and something else that Issei recognized immediately, the resonance of dragon power, transmitted through their bond and his sacred gear. Isamu created a construct of pure magical energy, a dragon, rendered in perfect detail, that soared through the air above the courtyard. It was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure, a demonstration of power and control that shouldn't be possible for someone so young. "Your son has the potential to be one of the most powerful devils of his generation," Drake observed with satisfaction. "Perhaps one of the most powerful ever. The combination of bloodlines in him is extraordinary." "I know. That's what worries me." "Why worry? Power is a gift. Power is also a burden. And he's only 5 years old." As the demonstration concluded and the dignitaries moved inside for refreshments, Issei gathered his children together. All 3 of them looked up at him with varying expressions, Akari with intellectual curiosity, Kurenai with energetic excitement, and Isamu with his characteristic calm observation. "You all did wonderfully," Issei said, kneeling down to their level. "I'm very proud of you. But remember what we've talked about regarding showing off your powers. That power is a responsibility, not a toy," Akari recited dutifully. She was his little scholar, always ready with the correct answer. "And that we should use it to protect people, not to hurt them or show off," Kurenai added, though she looked slightly guilty. She definitely enjoyed showing off her abilities. "And that being strong means being careful," Isamu said quietly. "Because we can hurt people without meaning to if we're not in control." "Exactly right," Issei said, pulling all 3 children into a hug. "You're all incredibly powerful, and that means you have to be extra responsible. Understand?" "Yes, Papa," they chorused, And despite everything, Issei's heart warmed at the term. They'd started calling him Papa when they began talking, and he'd never gotten tired of hearing it. Now go find your mothers and get cleaned up for dinner. We have guests tonight, so we need to be on our best behavior. The children scampered off, though Isamu walked rather than ran, maintaining his composed demeanor even in casual moments. Issei watched them go, feeling the familiar mixture of pride and concern that had become his constant companion as a father. You're brooding again, Rias said, appearing at his side with the quiet grace she'd perfected over years of being both a mother and a political figure. I can feel it through the bond. What's bothering you? Just thinking about how powerful they're becoming, Issei admitted. Kurenai mastered the power of destruction 3 years ahead of schedule. Akari's already reading texts that most devils don't study until they're decades old. And Isamu? He trailed off, shaking his head. Isamu is special, Rias agreed. Even by our standards. His magical capacity is already approaching what some adult devils never achieve. Lady Aesculapius thinks he might eventually rival Surzex in raw power. That's what worries me. They're only 5, Rias. They should be playing with toys and learning basic skills, not demonstrating abilities that would impress seasoned warriors. Rias took his hand, squeezing gently. There are children, Issei. They were always going to be exceptional. You're the Red Dragon Emperor, I'm a high-class devil from the Gremry line, and Mother carries the Bale bloodline. We couldn't have produced normal children even if we tried. I know. I want them to have a childhood. To be kids, not prodigies constantly on display. And they are having a childhood, Venelana said, joining them. She'd clearly been listening through their bond. Yes, they're powerful and yes, they're learning advanced techniques. But they also play games, tell jokes, have friends, and get into the kind of mischief all children engage in. Remember last week when Kurenai accidentally destroyed half the training ground while trying to impress a boy from the Phoenix family? Despite his concerns, Issei smiled. That had been quite the incident. His daughter's first crush had led to an overenthusiastic display of power that had required extensive repairs. Or when Akari spent 3 days building an elaborate magical calculation system only to realize she could have achieved the same result in 5 minutes with a simpler approach, Rias added with a laugh. She was so frustrated she nearly cried. Or when Isamu tried to create a living construct and accidentally made it too realistic, scaring half the servants in the estate, Venelana continued. We found him in the library afterward, frantically reading about how to dispel his own creation. Issei felt some of his tension ease. They were right, his children were powerful, but they were still children, making mistakes and learning as they went. The fact that their mistakes sometimes involved massive magical displays didn't change that fundamental truth. You're both right, he admitted. I'm probably worrying too much. You're their father, Venelana said warmly, kissing his cheek. Worrying too much is part of your job description. But trust that they're doing fine. We're raising them together, teaching them responsibility along with power, giving them love and stability and guidance. That's all we can do. That evening's dinner was a formal affair, with several noble families in attendance to discuss political matters and observe the famous triple family in action. Issei had grown more comfortable with these events over the years, though he still found devil politics tedious and overly complicated. The children were on their best behavior, sitting properly at the table and engaging in polite conversation when addressed. Akari impressed several nobles with her knowledge of magical theory, discussing complex topics with an understanding far beyond her years. Kurenai charmed everyone with her enthusiasm and bright smile, though Issei noticed Rias keeping a subtle magical restraint ready in case her daughter's excitement manifested as destructive power. Isamu, as usual, observed more than he spoke, his violet eyes taking in every detail of the gathering. When he did speak, his words were carefully chosen and remarkably insightful, often causing adults to do a double-take at the wisdom coming from such a young child. Your children are remarkable, Lady Phoenix commented during a lull in the conversation. I've never seen such power and control in 5-year-olds. You must be very proud. We are, Rias said with a warm smile. Though they can be quite a handful when their power manifests unexpectedly. I imagine so. Tell me, how do you manage the family dynamics? With 3 children from 2 mothers and 1 father, all living together? The question was posed with genuine curiosity rather than judgment, though Issei still bristled slightly at the implication. The same way any family manages, Venelana replied smoothly. With love, communication, and a lot of patience. The children understand their family structure and accept it as normal because it's all they've ever known. And they get along well? No rivalry or jealousy. Oh, they fight, Issei said with a laugh. Believe me, siblings are siblings regardless of the family configuration. Just last week, Akari and Kurenai had an argument about whose turn it was to use the training room that nearly resulted in a magical duel. And Isamu has definitely complained about his sisters being too loud when he's trying to study. But they also love each other fiercely, Rias added. Yesterday I found all three of them sleeping together in Isamu's bed because Kurenai had a nightmare, and her siblings came to comfort her. They're a unit, these three. Whatever challenges they face together. After dinner, as the adults retired to a sitting room for drinks and continued conversation, the children were allowed to retreat to their shared playroom, a large space that had been heavily reinforced with magical protections to withstand their activities. Issei checked on them an hour later and found a scene that made him smile. Akari had constructed an elaborate fortress out of magical barriers, and was explaining its defensive properties to her siblings. Kurenai was adding decorative elements using carefully controlled bursts of her power of destruction, creating intricate patterns in the air. Isamu sat in the middle of the fortress, his hands weaving complex magical patterns as he created small dragon constructs that flew around the space. Papa! Kurenai called when she spotted him. Come look! We built a castle. Issei entered the magical fortress, ducking slightly to fit through the barrier entrance. Inside, the three children had created a remarkably sophisticated structure, combining their different abilities into a cohesive whole. This is incredible, Issei said honestly. You three work well together. Isamu did most of the hard parts, Akari admitted. His magic is stronger than ours. But I figured out the structural calculations, and Kurenai made it pretty. Everyone contributed, Isamu said quietly, and Issei felt a surge of pride at his son's diplomatic response. It's better when we work together. That's very wise, Isamu. And it's true, you're always stronger together than you are apart. Issei settled onto the floor with them, and immediately all three children piled onto him, a tangle of limbs and happy chatter. This was what he'd been worried about losing, these simple moments of joy and childhood innocence. But his fears had been unfounded. Yes, his children were incredibly powerful. Yes, they were already learning techniques that most devils wouldn't master for decades. But they were also just kids, playing and learning and growing together. Papa, will you tell us about when you fought the gods? Kurenai asked, her eyes bright with excitement. This was one of their favorite bedtime stories, despite being entirely true. Again? I've told you that story 100 times, but it's such a good story. Akari protested. And you always tell it differently. I want to hear about Drake, Isamu added quietly. About the dragon inside your arm. The boy has excellent taste, Drake rumbled with amusement. Perhaps I should introduce myself properly to him soon. He has the potential to be a sacred gear user himself when he's older. You think so? I'm certain. The resonance is there. I can feel it. Your son has inherited not just your blood, but your connection to dragon power. In time, he may manifest abilities that rival your own. Issei pushed that concerning thought aside and began telling his children about the battle against Trihexa, the legendary beast that had threatened all of existence. He edited the story appropriately for their age, but even the sanitized version was thrilling, full of courage and sacrifice and the power of working together. By the time he finished, all three children were yawning, their earlier energy fading into sleepy contentment. Issei carried them one by one to their bedrooms. Akari and Kurenai shared a large room decorated in shades of red and gold, while Isamu preferred a quieter space done in silver and blue. Good night, Papa, Akari mumbled, already half asleep as he tucked her in. Love you, Papa, Kurenai added, reaching up to hug him tightly. Sleep well, Papa, Isamu said quietly, his violet eyes already closing. I love you all so much, Issei whispered, kissing each of them on the forehead. Sweet dreams. He returned to his and his wife's quarters to find Rias and Venelana already there, having escaped the political dinner. Both women looked tired but satisfied, another successful social obligation completed. The children asleep? Rias asked, already knowing the answer through their bond. Out cold. They built a magical fortress in the playroom that was actually pretty impressive, then demanded a story about fighting gods. They love hearing about your adventures, Venelana said with a smile. Though I think they've heard about the Trihexa battle so many times they could recite it themselves. Probably. But I don't mind telling it again. Anything that makes them happy. Issei settled onto their bed, and both women joined him, the three of them arranging themselves in the comfortable configuration they perfected over years together. Did you hear Lady Phoenix's questions about our family dynamics? Rias asked, her head on Issei's shoulder. Hard to miss. She wasn't exactly subtle. She meant well, Venelana said from his other side. People are still fascinated by our situation, even 5 years later. A mother and daughter married to the same man, raising children together. It's unprecedented, and people naturally want to understand how it works. How do you think it's working? Issei asked, a question he'd been meaning to raise for a while. I mean, really. Are you both happy with how things have turned out? There was a moment of silence as both women considered the question seriously. I am, Rias said finally. It's not what I imagined my life would be when I was younger. I never dreamed I'd be sharing my husband with my mother. But what we have is real, Issei. We're a family, and we work. The children are happy and healthy, we love each other, and we've proven that our unusual situation can be successful. I agree, Venelana added. This arrangement is still strange to me sometimes, still requires conscious effort to navigate properly. But I wouldn't change it. You and Rias make me happy, the children bring me joy, and I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. What about Theodicus? Issei asked carefully. How is that relationship working out? Surprisingly well, Venelana said. He and I have found a new rhythm after 5 years. We're still married, still love each other, but our relationship has evolved. He's been wonderful with the children, all 3 of them call him grandfather, which delights him. And he and you have developed a genuine friendship, which I never expected but deeply appreciate. That was true. Issei's relationship with Theodicus had gone from awkward to cordial to genuinely warm over the years. The older devil had proven himself to be supportive, understanding, and surprisingly good at offering advice on both parenting and devil politics. They'd bonded over shared frustration with noble society's complexities and shared love for Venelana and the children. I'm lucky to have all of you, Issei said quietly. 5 years ago, I was terrified that I wouldn't be able to handle this. The marriage, the children, the responsibility.